Story 1. I left my wife because she couldn't get over her parents dying, and I don't feel guilty about it. My wife was always very close with her parents, and when they passed away in a car crash 5 years ago, she went into a deep slump. She wouldn't leave her bed, and I took on every chore and cared for our newborn by myself. The problem is it's been like this for 5 years. For 5 years, she hasn't left her bed. And I mean that literally. She expected me to cook her meals, and when I was at work, she ordered takeout. We hadn't had intimacy in 5 years. I didn't remember the last time she kissed me. She barely speaks to our 6-year-old daughter. I did every household chore myself. I worked 60-hour weeks. I finally worked up the courage, and I decided to put my foot down about everything for the sake of our kids, for me and especially for her. I sat next to her on the bed, took her hand gently in mine, and spoke softly. I know it's hard. It's been really hard for both of us, but we can't keep going on like this, stuck in this endless sadness. Our kid missed you. I miss you too. I miss hearing your laugh and seeing your smile. Please, for all of us, can you try to take even a small step forward with me? I asked her. She looked back at me. I saw a singular tear fall down her cheek. She squeezed my hand weakly and said, I don't know if I can. I was beginning to lose my patience. I told her she had to get up. She had to. I didn't care how sad she felt. She had to get up. She went silent. The air felt heavy. And then I said that I couldn't keep doing this alone. I was tired. She told me that I had no idea of how it felt to lose my parents and refused to speak to me after that. I yelled, You're seriously telling me I don't understand what it's like to lose someone? You were getting your master's degree. You were studying to be something while you were in school. I supported you through everything. I paid for your tuition. I paid for the house that we're living in. I worked almost 70 hours a week to put food on the table for us while trying to be there for our kids. You remember it? During that time, Andrew died. My own brother, and I couldn't even attend his funeral because I had to work to put food on our table. When Drew died, I didn't have time to mope around and stay in the bed every day. I had to get up and work even harder for you. For us. I was still here for you. When you decided to leave school in the middle of the semester, I still paid for the full class. When you needed therapy, I paid for it. Whenever you needed a shoulder to cry on or someone to be strong for you, I did it. I was there. I was depressed, Kay. I didn't want to get out of bed in the morning. I didn't want to be the only one taking care of Connor, taking him to school every day before I work a 10-hour shift and not being able to greet him as he gets off the bus. I'm not trying to invalidate your feelings, but after 5 years of grieving, I am tired. Kay didn't say anything. She just looked at me. I asked her if she had anything to say and she stayed silent. This infuriated me because it felt like I was talking to a brick wall. I woke Connor up and I left the house for the night and got a hotel. I needed some space away. On the drive there, Connor asked me why Mom wasn't coming with us, and I told him that she would rather stay in the bed because she needed some rest. After we left, she kept calling me and texting me. I texted her back that I would see her in the morning, and she sent a text to come back home that instant. But I needed some space from her. I turned my phone on Do Not Disturb, put Connor to bed, and got his clothes ready for school the next morning. While he was asleep, I started writing a letter to give to Kay. The next morning, I woke up Connor and drove him to school. Since our home was in between his school and my job, I stopped by the house and dropped off the letter. In it, I told Kay how much I loved her and wanted the best for her. I told her again everything that I said the night before, how I was tired and couldn't keep working 50 to 60-hour weeks to support our family. While I was the only one taking care of Connor, I was also the only one keeping up with the house. And it was starting to get worse. Clothes and dishes would often pile up in the sink and would still be there when I got home. The rooms were messy if I didn't straighten them up. And you can forget about dusting. After 5 years of keeping this up, I was getting burned out. At the end of the letter, I told her that if she couldn't help me with anything or get out the bed for herself, then I would have to get a divorce. I left the letter on the kitchen counter before work. I would normally buy her breakfast or cook her breakfast, but I didn't have the time that morning, so I knew she would come downstairs and see it. Around 11 odd, while I was at work, Kay called me and was yelling on the phone. She asked me how I could treat her like that after she lost both of her parents. She said, "Now I'm making her lose her family." I said that it wasn't the best time to talk about this and that we could talk when I got home. When I got home that night, I was greeted at the door by Kay. This was the first time I saw her out of the bed after I got off work in years. But it wasn't a pleasant surprise. She started talking about the letter I dropped off and how I was selfish and a lowlife for wanting to break up our family. She was screaming and throwing things in the living room. She said that I was a failure at being a husband and a dad and that I would never be half the man her therapist was. She said he would let her express herself and didn't judge her like I did. I let her get all of her emotions and words out before I got up, wiped the tears on my face, and without a word, I left the house. I drove around, but not to the hotel this time. I drove around the town and tried to clear my head of all the hurtful things she said to me. But under the city lights, all that played through my mind was the last 5 years and the arguments we'd had. I couldn't imagine spending my life without Kay. And I thought about how this could affect Connor. I thought about couples therapy. But between the house and the kids and only one income, I knew we wouldn't be able to afford both of our therapists. After everything that happened that night, I slept in the car. No hotel, no house. I just turned off the engine and stayed there in a supermarket parking lot, staring at nothing while watching the sky change color through the window. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt empty. I felt like a shell without even the strength to feel guilt. The next morning, I took Connor to school as usual. He asked if we were going back home. I said yes. And it was true. As much as everything in me screamed to run away, I needed to try one more time for him because Connor deserved to grow up with a minimally functional family. And if that meant swallowing my pride and making one more attempt, then so be it. But it would be the last one. I returned home at 9 a.m. Kay was awake, sitting on the edge of the bed as if waiting for me. It was strange. There was something mechanical in the way she held the tea mug, something forced in the way she looked at me. No good morning. Just an uncomfortable silence. I sat in the chair in the corner of the room and took a deep breath. I don't want to fight. I'm not here to accuse you or attack you. I just want to propose something simple. She didn't answer, but she didn't ignore me either, which for me was already progress. I continued, let's do a test. 1 week, just one. During this week, you will get out of bed every day at 10 o'clock in the morning. You'll have breakfast with us. You'll talk to Connor. You'll put him to bed at least once. And if you can help with one household chore, just one. It doesn't even have to be every day. Could be putting away the dishes. Could be folding his clothes. Whatever you can manage, but make it real. She remained silent, looking at her mug. I almost gave up at that moment, but then she nodded her head. A weak movement, almost imperceptible, but it was a yes, and it was all I needed. For the first 2 days, I wanted to believe. She appeared in the kitchen at the agreed time. She sat at the table. She didn't say much, but she responded when Connor spoke. She even put her plate in the sink when she finished breakfast. On the 3rd day, she asked what his favorite cartoon was now. I almost cried. I wanted so badly to believe that this was the turning point. That finally, after 5 years of grief and emptiness, she was trying, really trying. But it only took the 4th day for everything to fall apart. I woke up and Kay wasn't in the kitchen. I went to the bedroom. She was still in bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. I asked if she was okay. She said yes. She was just tired. On the 5th day, she didn't even respond. On the 6th, she ordered food on her phone before I got home, even with dinner ready on the table. On the 7th, she slept all day, and she didn't even bother to justify it. On the 8th day, when the week of the agreement ended, I entered the room already knowing what I would find. The dishes she should have put away were still in the dish rack since Tuesday. The laundry basket was forgotten in the hallway, and her motionless, the same as always. Kay, I said, stopping at the door. This was your chance. You said you would try. She didn't look at me. She just murmured, I did try. You tried. I asked, holding back the lump in my throat. You got up for 2 days, and you spent the other 5 pretending you couldn't hear Connor calling for you. You didn't try. You acted, and only because you were afraid of divorce. She then turned slowly and, for the first time in days, looked at me. The look wasn't one of sadness nor anger. It was indifference. And what if it was? She replied coldly. You were going to leave me anyway. That phrase tore me apart because deep down maybe it was true. Maybe I had already decided to leave even before proposing that last attempt. But hearing it from her mouth with such coldness, as if all of this was just a game, it hurt more than any shouting she could have done. I turned my back. I went to Connor's room. He was drawing alone. A little house with 3 stick figures. Dad, son, and the mother erased with a finger, a pencil smudge where once there was a figure. It was there that I understood that he was already saying everything without words, that Connor was already living with a constant absence, that what I thought was effort for him was just prolonging everyone's pain, including mine. I left the room without making noise, and that night, I began to plan my definitive departure. That Tuesday, the day started too normal for my taste, and that was already a bad sign. Connor woke up with energy, put on his uniform by himself, and came to me with his shoes in hand, asking for help tying them. Kay didn't even leave the bedroom. It had been a week since she had broken the schedule, and she didn't even bother to pretend to make an effort anymore. I was late. I had an important meeting, and my boss had already given me 2 subtle warnings about my recurring lateness. I dropped Connor at school, quickly stopped by the market to buy coffee, and arrived at work almost bumping into the time clock. I took a deep breath and dove into the chaos of the company, trying to forget for a few hours that my life outside of there was a minefield. The meeting dragged on. My phone was on silent, as I always did in these situations so as not to appear inattentive. When it ended, it was almost 6 o'clock in the evening. I hurriedly left the room with the uncomfortable feeling that I had forgotten something. I only realized what it was when I unlocked my phone and saw 9 missed calls from the school, 2 from the principal, and a message in all caps. You forgot your son. If you do not show up within 30 minutes, we will be obliged to contact social services. My heart stopped. Not literally, but it felt like it. I got in the car with trembling hands. I called Kay, hoping she had gone to pick him up. Maybe by some miracle. Maybe. But the phone rang and went straight to voicemail. I called again, once more, and again. Nothing. The school was already closed when I arrived. Coordinator was waiting for me with her arms crossed. Connor was beside her, sitting on a bench with his little eyes red from crying so much. The woman looked at me as if I were a monster. Sir, we tried to contact the mother as well, but she didn't answer. We had to activate the protocol. A representative from Child Protective Services has already been notified. I apologized 1,000 times. I took Connor in my arms and hugged him tightly, as if that could erase the abandonment he felt for almost 2 hours. He forgave me immediately, as only children do. He said he understood and that the school lady stayed with him and even gave him cookies. But I knew. I saw it in his eyes that would leave a mark. When I got home, Kay was in the bedroom, lying down, looking at the ceiling, the same position as always. The phone was on the nightstand, screen facing down. I entered like a hurricane. You didn't even see that the school called. You didn't even bother to get up. She blinked slowly without any hurry. I had a headache. A headache? Kay, the school called 10 times. Connor was waiting for more than an hour alone. Social services were notified. Do you understand what that means? She then got up slowly with a tranquility that turned my stomach. She crossed her arms and said disdainfully, "You didn't have to forget about him. That's your job. Remember? My job. You're his mother. Do you think it's normal not to get out of bed or even answer the phone when your son might be in danger? Oh, of course. Now everything is my fault. You want to paint me as a monster just to have a clean reason to leave me. But it won't be that easy. This isn't about leaving you, Kay. It's about Connor. He's suffering. You're too blind in your pain to realize what you're doing to him. To us, this isn't grief anymore. It's neglect." She then walked up to me, eyes wide and voice trembling with anger. "You think you can judge me? You have no idea what it's like to lose everything at once. I lost my parents, my foundations. I died with them. Don't you understand? I do understand because I lost too. I lost my brother. I lost my marriage. I lost the woman you were. And I'm about to lose my son because you can't get out of the damn bed." She then took a step back, took a deep breath, and said something that chilled me. "If you try to take Connor from me, I swear I'll fight to the end. I'll ask for custody and I'll use everything I have. My diagnosis, my history, my consultations, to show that the problem here is you. You're threatening to take Connor from me after everything I've done? After 5 years of playing both father and mother alone? You want war, you'll have it." I stood still, my throat locked. She was serious. For the first time in years, I saw energy in her eyes. But it was anger, not hope. It was as if I were the enemy, as if she had woken up not to rebuild, but to destroy. I went up to Connor's room and closed the door. He was sleeping, clutching the old teddy bear my mother had given him when he was born. I sat on the floor and began to cry softly, not knowing what hurt more. The fear of losing him or the guilt for not having done this before. That night, I made my decision. The next morning, after a sleepless night full of voices in my head repeating everything Kay had said, I did what I should have done a long time ago. I waited for Connor to go to school and went straight to the law office that a friend had recommended to me months ago. At the time, I didn't have the courage. Now, it was this or lose my son. The lawyer listened to me carefully. She didn't interrupt, didn't judge me. She just took notes while I explained the last 5 years of my life. How Kay had spent all this time without getting out of bed. How I took care of everything alone. How she showed no affection for our son. And about the incident at school that involved social services. When I finished, she took a deep breath and said, "This won't be easy. The mother has legal advantages in disputes like this, especially if she can justify her inertia with medical reports. But you have history, you have evidence, and you have the truth, and that matters." We started the process the same day. I gathered medical receipts, old photos of the state of the house, ignored messages, school records, reports from the pediatrician, and even notes from Connor himself that he wrote and left in the hallway outside his mother's room. Simple things, but devastating. Like, "Mommy, today I did well in school." Or, "We could watch a movie together." I went to sleep lighter that night. For the first time, I felt that I was doing something not just for myself, but for my son. But Kay didn't stay quiet for long. In less than 48 hours, my mother-in-law, who had always been absent, it should be said, sent me a 4-minute voice message calling me a coward, selfish, and insensitive. She said that women who lose their parents carry pains that men will never understand, and that instead of supporting my wife, I was trying to destroy her. By the end of that week, half of our acquaintances had blocked me or sent indirect messages on social media. A cousin of Kay's even posted an indignant text saying that there are men who only want happy and smiling wives, but don't know how to be husbands when they are in pieces. There was even a hashtag and many likes, but nobody knew. Nobody was there at 3 o'clock in the morning when Connor had a fever and I ran alone with him to the hospital. Nobody saw the piles of dirty clothes accumulating, nor the forgotten birthdays, nor Connor's looks begging for a mother who didn't come. Nobody knew how many times I cried in the bathroom, in the car, at work, hidden even from myself. But I knew, and that was enough. I stayed firm with discretion. I responded to everything with silence. I let the attacks pass like wind. My focus was Connor. He began to change. It was subtle at first. He started singing softly in the bath. Then he asked to take his favorite snack to school. He started telling me more stories about his day, asked to decorate his room with dinosaur stickers. And one day, without me asking, he hugged me tightly and said, "Daddy, I like when it's just us. It's calmer." That hurt, but it also gave me strength. My house no longer seemed like a war zone. The silence was no longer heavy. Kay's absence, though tragic, brought relief. Sad but true. Meanwhile, Kay continued trying to manipulate the narrative. She told the social worker that I was alienating our son. She said that I forbade her from seeing Connor when, in fact, she simply never tried. The social worker wanted to schedule a supervised visit. I agreed. I wanted to show that I had nothing to hide. On the day of the visit, Kay appeared with a pale and haggard expression, but for the first time wearing makeup, as if she wanted to act like she was getting better. Connor was tense. He didn't know whether to hug her or run away. When the social worker called the two of them to talk alone, he hesitated. He looked at me insecure. I said, "Go on, son. It's okay." After the visit, the professional pulled me aside and said, he said very serious things. "I can't share them yet for legal reasons, but just continue with this process. He needs you." I understood everything without another word. Kay didn't know, but the son she barely saw now had a voice, and he was finally being heard. The legal battle was far from over, but inside me, something had already changed. The guilt I had carried for 5 years was finally being replaced by courage. The day of the hearing arrived. I barely slept the night before. I spent hours looking at the ceiling, listening to Connor's light breathing in the room next door, trying not to be crushed by the fear of what could happen. Because despite everything, an irrational part of me still believed that, in the end, everything could be distorted against me. I wasn't perfect. I had shouted. I had lost my patience. And I knew how the system could sometimes treat mother's pain as an excuse for everything. When I entered the courthouse, Kay was already there. Hair tied up any old way, dark clothes, empty look. But different from what I expected, she was surrounded by people. Relatives, friends, even a therapist she had brought to testify in her favor. The game was set. My lawyer asked me to keep calm. "They will try to provoke you. Let them burn themselves," she said. And that's what I did. The hearing was long. Kay's lawyer began by painting her as a woman devastated by tragedy. A victim of circumstances. A mother who just needed support to get back on her feet. It was convincing. I saw faces in the room nodding with pity. But then it was our turn. My lawyer presented the evidence. Dated photos showing the state of the house, medical reports indicating emotional abandonment, school reports recording the mother's absence at meetings, activities, and important dates, letters from teachers talking about Connor's withdrawn behavior, and then the notes, small, torn, simple, but speaking more than any testimony. "Today was my birthday. Mommy forgot. It's okay. I did well in the soccer game. I wish Mommy had seen." The silence in the room was heavy. Even the judge seemed to swallow hard. They called the social worker who had supervised the visit. She said the minor demonstrated discomfort, anxiety, and sadness regarding his mother, and he spontaneously reported episodes of emotional neglect consistent over years. Kay, who until then had maintained control, began to fidget in her chair. She snorted, whispered to her lawyer, and when she realized she was losing, she lost control completely. She suddenly stood up and shouted, "It's a lie! All lies! He manipulated my son against me. He did this. I lost everything because of him." The judge banged the gavel on the bench and called for order. 2 security guards approached. Kay pushed one of them, trying to return to the front of the courtroom, screaming, "You don't know what he did to me. I was the victim. I deserve custody. I am the mother." She was forcibly removed, crying, screaming, cursing everyone there. I remained motionless. I wanted to disappear. I didn't feel victory. I didn't feel immediate relief. I felt shame. I felt sadness because seeing the woman I had loved degrade herself that way in front of everyone was like watching an accident in slow motion, unable to do anything. The judge resumed the session and read the decision. Primary custody will be granted to the father. The mother will have the right to supervised visits conditional on future psychiatric evaluations. And so the sentence was delivered. When we left the courthouse, the first thing I did was call the school and ask to release Connor early. When he ran toward me in the parking lot, hugging my legs, I broke down. I crouched on the ground, hugged him tightly, and cried without shame. It took weeks to process everything. At first, Connor asked about his mother almost every day. I just said that she was trying to get better and that he could see her later with the presence of a trusted adult. He accepted the answer, sad but serene. With time, the questions decreased. His drawings changed. Instead of broken houses or faceless figures, he began to draw parks, trucks, animals. He started to laugh more, to ask to ride his bicycle, to make plans. I still carried pain. I still sometimes woke up in the middle of the night imagining if I could have done something different, something better. I still missed the K that existed before everything collapsed. But I learned that there are battles you don't win with love. There are battles where to save someone, you need to save yourself first. Today, when I see Connor sleeping peacefully, sprawled on the bed with his legs outside the covers, I realize I didn't destroy a family. I rebuilt a life. And sometimes that's all you can do. Now on to the next story. Story 2. My name's Nathan. I'm 29 and I never thought I'd be the kind of person to air my family drama online. But here we are. The whole mess started just after my mom passed away. She wasn't just my mom. She was the glue that held every brittle piece of our family together. Without her, all the cracks started showing, and some of those cracks were more like gaping canyons. My older brother, Lucas, was the first to take advantage of it. At the funeral, I could already sense the tension. People mourn in different ways, sure, but Lucas had this odd energy about him, like he wasn't grieving so much as calculating. He kept hovering around conversations about Mom's house, Mom's savings, even the little things like her jewelry. Every time someone mentioned how much they'd miss her, Lucas would nod, but his eyes would flicker like he was elsewhere, planning something. It didn't sit right with me, but I kept my mouth shut. Losing Mom was enough pain for 1 week, and I wasn't about to pick a fight with him there of all places. Then came the reading of the will. The lawyer had everyone sit in the old dining room, the one where Mom used to make us all sit down together for Sunday dinners, no matter how much we fought during the week. I took the chair she always made me sit in, the one closest to the kitchen, and it felt heavy, like I was carrying her absence on my shoulders. That's when Lucas stood up before anyone else could even begin. He didn't just stand. He performed, clearing his throat, straightening his jacket, looking around the room like some actor about to take center stage. Then he dropped the first bomb. Since I took care of her, the house and savings belong to me. The room went silent. My aunt's mouth opened slightly like she wanted to say something, but didn't dare. I felt my stomach twist because that wasn't true. Not entirely. Yes, Lucas lived closer and visited sometimes, but I took care of her. Mom had a nurse. I handled all the paperwork, the bills, even stayed over plenty of weekends to help her with groceries and medication. But the way Lucas said it, as if he was the sole devoted child, made me feel like I'd just been erased from the story. Then he did something worse. He waved a piece of paper. He said it was Mom's signature, that she'd written up her wishes in her own words, giving him everything. My heart dropped when I saw it because from across the room, I could already tell something was off. The handwriting looked shaky, uneven, almost like a bad copy of her neat, looping script. But Lucas held it high like a holy text, as if we all just had to accept it. I didn't argue. Not yet. Instead, I nodded slowly and said, "Interesting," while trying to keep my face calm inside, though my thoughts were racing. Lucas was pulling something bold, something ugly, and he was so sure of himself that he didn't even hide the smug curve of his mouth. But I knew something he didn't, something Mom had done long before she passed. Something that made his little performance meaningless. And in that moment, I had to hide a smile because Lucas thought he was already standing on top of the mountain, but he had no idea the ground beneath him was about to crumble. That was the first sign of disrespect, the opening act of what would turn into a full-scale war between me and my brother. And as much as I wanted to call him out right then and there, I knew patience was the key. Let him feel victorious for now. Let him think he's fooled everyone. The higher he climbed on his fake pedestal, the harder he'd fall when the truth finally came crashing down. And so I sat back, keeping quiet, my fists clenched under the table. I could already feel the tension building like a storm on the horizon. This was just the beginning, and I could sense things were only going to get uglier from here. Lucas didn't waste any time basking in the silence he'd created. The lawyer hadn't even opened the official envelope yet, but my brother was already strutting like the verdict was final. He tucked that suspicious signature paper back into his folder and sat down with the smug little smirk plastered on his face, the kind that made my blood simmer. I caught my aunt's eyes flicker toward me, then back at Lucas, but she didn't say a word. No one did. That silence gave him permission to keep going. And oh, did he ever. Over the next few days, Lucas began acting like the house already had his name etched above the front door. Mom's place, her home of 30 years, still smelled faintly of her lavender candles. But that didn't stop him from marching through the rooms like a landlord taking inventory. He told me, "You should probably start boxing up your things, Nathan. Mom would want me to keep the house as it is. You know, her memory intact." The nerve of him, as if I had clutter lying around in the corners of her house. The only things I had there were a couple of old photo albums in the attic and maybe a box of childhood books she refused to throw away. But Lucas spoke with this tone that implied I was a guest overstaying my welcome in my own mother's home. I bit my tongue and said, "I'll deal with my stuff later," just to keep the peace. But that peace didn't last long. By the end of the week, Lucas had called a family meeting in the living room. I walked in to find he'd already seated our cousins and a couple of extended relatives around Mom's coffee table where he had spread out bills, insurance papers, and even a pen sitting dramatically on top of a yellow legal pad. He cleared his throat like some kind of CEO preparing to present quarterly earnings. "As the one who cared for Mom," he started again, repeating his script, "I'll be taking over all her affairs. The house is mine. The savings will be consolidated into an account under my name." And he actually had the audacity to glance at me. "Nathan doesn't need to worry about it. He has his own life to live." I nearly laughed out loud at that. My own life to live? I'd been the one juggling Mom's medical bills, making sure her prescriptions were filled, driving her to endless doctor's appointments when Lucas was too busy. Yet here he was rewriting history in front of everyone. One of our cousins, Grace, raised a timid hand like she was in school. "Shouldn't we, wait for the official will?" she asked softly. Lucas waved her off. "Oh, don't worry. I've got it here," he said, patting that same folder with the fake paper inside. "The lawyer's just going to confirm what Mom already wrote herself. I'm just trying to make things easier on everyone by getting ahead." The manipulation was thick in the air. He wasn't just claiming things. He was trying to gaslight the entire family into believing this had always been the plan, that questioning him would mean disrespecting Mom's wishes. And worse, he kept bringing up how he took care of her, as if repeating the phrase enough times would make it truth. After that meeting, I noticed how quickly relatives began treating me differently. A cousin I'd grown up with, Michael, pulled me aside and said, "Look, Nathan, if Mom wanted Lucas to have the house, maybe it's best to just let him. You don't want to make this ugly." Ugly? The situation was already festering like a wound. Lucas had poisoned the well, painting himself as the saint and me as the outsider, the greedy younger brother trying to snatch something that wasn't mine. Every time I opened my mouth to defend myself, someone would give me this look like I was the one stirring drama in the middle of our grief. The worst part was watching Lucas move into Mom's bedroom like he belonged there. He didn't even wait. Within days, he'd swapped her floral bedspread for his own gray comforter, stacked his sneakers neatly in her closet, and started rearranging the furniture. I walked in once and caught him measuring the wall where her cross had hung for decades, muttering something about a bigger TV fitting nicely. That hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just entitlement anymore. It was a razor. He wasn't preserving her memory. He was scrubbing it away and replacing it with his own. And then came the real slap in the face. One evening when I stopped by to drop off some mail from the lawyer, Lucas met me at the door with his arms crossed. "Nathan, I don't think you should come by unannounced anymore. This is my home now and I need to protect my space. If you need anything, call first." I froze on the porch, staring at the house where I'd grown up, where Mom had hugged me after my first heartbreak, where she'd spent her final days, my home. And now my own brother was barring me from it like I was a trespasser. Inside me, something snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't shove past him. I just smiled politely, turned on my heel, and walked back to my car. Because in that moment, I realized the truth. Lucas was overplaying his hand. He was digging himself deeper into a pit he couldn't climb out of. And when the real will was read, the official one Mom had carefully written and signed, everything he'd built on lies and manipulation would collapse. But for now, I let him think he'd won. I tried to keep my distance after that night on the porch. I told myself to be patient, to let the lawyer handle everything, to not get sucked into Lucas's games. But Lucas wasn't satisfied with just staking his claim. He needed everyone to see him as the rightful heir, the martyr who gave up his life for Mom. And to do that, he had to drag me down in front of the family. The first strike came quietly through whispers. A week after the funeral, I noticed cousins giving me side eye at gatherings or suddenly changing the subject when I walked into the room. It didn't take long to find out why. Lucas had been telling everyone that I hadn't even visited Mom in her last months, that I'd abandoned her while he was the only one who stayed. He spun this story so smoothly that some relatives, people who should have known better, actually started to believe it. Grace, the cousin who'd spoken up at his so-called meeting, called me late one night. "Nathan," she said, "I don't know what's going on between you and Lucas, but people are saying you didn't care for and at all, that you only show up now because of the inheritance. Is that true?" Her voice was hesitant, like she didn't want to accuse me but couldn't ignore the rumors. My chest tightened. I remembered every Sunday I'd spent sitting with Mom in that kitchen, every grocery trip, every night in the hospital waiting room while Lucas claimed he was too busy with work. And now he had the gall to erase all of that with a few poisonous words. But the rumors were just the beginning. The real betrayal hit harder. One afternoon, I stopped by the house, my mom's house, because the lawyer had asked me to pick up some documents. I called ahead as Lucas demanded, and he grudgingly agreed to let me come by. When I arrived, I walked through the front door and felt something was off immediately. The walls were bare. Mom's paintings, her watercolors of the garden she'd loved so much, were gone. The shelves that used to hold family photo albums were empty. Even her little porcelain angel figurines, which she'd collected since before I was born, had vanished. I found Lucas in the living room, his feet propped up on the coffee table, flipping through a glossy real estate magazine. When I asked what happened, he didn't even look up. "Oh, I sold those," he said casually. "Most of Mom's stuff was clutter. Buyers don't want to see personal junk when a house is being prepped." I froze. "Sold?" My voice cracked. "Those weren't yours to sell, Lucas. Those were her things. Our family's memories." He finally glanced at me, his expression flat. "Look, Nathan, someone had to start making responsible decisions. You weren't here. I was. So I did what had to be done." I walked through the house in disbelief. Her jewelry box gone. Her sewing machine, the one she'd used to make our Halloween costumes when we were kids, gone. Even the framed photo of us as children sitting on Santa's lap, one of Mom's favorites, had been stripped from the mantel. The house looked hollow, like someone had gutted her presence out of it. I spun back to him, anger boiling in my chest. "You had no right. None. That wasn't clutter. That was her life. How dare you sell it without even talking to me?" Lucas leaned back, smirking. "Don't get sentimental. You've always been too emotional about this stuff. Mom trusted me to handle things. You're just here trying to make yourself look good after being absent for so long." That cut deep. It wasn't just manipulation anymore. It was a knife twisted straight into everything I had done for her. He was rewriting history in real time, tearing away the proof of her life, erasing the physical reminders of her love, and pinning the blame on me. But the final straw came when I stepped into Mom's bedroom. The closet door was wide open, and I saw it immediately. Her jewelry chest, or rather, the space where it used to be. The small mahogany box she'd kept on the dresser with her wedding ring nestled inside along with a few heirlooms passed down from her mother. Gone. I turned on Lucas, my voice shaking. "Where is it?" He didn't even flinch. "The ring? Sold it last week. Got a good price, too. Don't worry, I'll put it to good use." Something inside me broke at that moment. That ring wasn't just a piece of metal. It was the symbol of everything Mom had held on to after Dad died. She used to twist it gently whenever she was thinking, like it kept her grounded. And Lucas had sold it like it was nothing more than spare change in a pawn shop drawer. I remember standing there in the doorway of her empty room, my hands trembling, my throat so tight I could barely breathe. That was the turning point. The moment I realized Lucas wasn't just entitled, he was dangerous to Mom's memory, to the truth, to everything I cared about. And as much as it shattered me to see what he'd done, it also lit something inside me. A quiet, burning resolve. He thought he'd won. He thought he could strip the walls bare, spread lies, and walk away with everything. But he had no idea what Mom had done before she passed. No idea what was waiting for him once the official will was read. For the first time since the funeral, I felt a strange calm settle over me because Lucas had crossed a line that couldn't be undone. And I knew then that when the time came, I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to make sure his house of cards came crashing down in front of everyone he'd fooled. After that day in Mom's bedroom, I couldn't shake the image of her jewelry box being gone, the hollow space on the dresser where it had always sat. It haunted me. I went home to my apartment that night, sat down at the kitchen table, and just stared at my hands. They were still trembling. The anger I felt was suffocating, but underneath it was something heavier, a crushing sense of powerlessness. Lucas had stripped Mom's house bare, sold off her things, poisoned the family against me, and carried himself like a king sitting on a throne he hadn't earned. And the worst part, everyone else seemed to be falling in line. It didn't matter what I said because his version of the story, his lies, were louder. Over the next week, the isolation grew sharper. A cousin who used to call me almost daily suddenly stopped answering. An uncle who'd promised to stay neutral pulled me aside and said, "Maybe you should just let Lucas have it. Nathan, it's not worth tearing the family apart." Every word felt like another door closing, shutting me out of my own blood. The lowest point came at a family dinner. Lucas had organized it, naturally, under the guise of honoring Mom's memory. But when I arrived, it was clear what the real purpose was, parading himself as the rightful heir. He stood at the head of the table telling stories about how he sacrificed for Mom. Stories that twisted the truth until I barely recognized them. When he described driving her to the hospital during one of her bad spells, he conveniently left out that it had been me sitting by her bedside all night while he went home to get some rest. I tried to interject, to correct him gently, but the room turned on me like I'd broken some sacred rule. "Nathan," one of my aunts snapped, "this isn't about arguing. Let Lucas speak." I swallowed hard and sat back. My appetite evaporated. By the end of the night, I felt like a ghost at the table, present but invisible, every word I said dissolving before it landed. When I left, I sat in my car for a long time, the engine off, the street lamp casting a dim glow across the windshield. I'd never felt so small, so cut off. It was like Lucas had stolen not just Mom's belongings, but my place in the family itself. That was my rock bottom. The realization that if I kept fighting on his terms, if I kept trying to argue louder than his lies, I would lose because he was controlling the narrative, painting me as greedy and absent while I was the one clinging to memories and truth no one wanted to hear. But rock bottom has a strange way of clearing your vision. Sitting in that car, staring out at the empty street, I realized I couldn't fight him head-on. Not yet. I had to bide my time. Let him dig his hole deeper. Let him expose himself with his greed and arrogance. That's when I remembered Mom's quiet wisdom, something she told me once after Dad passed. Patience is what separates strength from anger. Anger burns itself out. Patience wins in the end. So I decided to be patient. I stopped showing up at Lucas's orchestrated family meetings. I stopped trying to argue with cousins or defend myself against his lies. If they wanted to believe him, let them. I started walking away, retreating into silence, letting Lucas think he had finally broken me down. Because the truth, the real truth, was sitting in a sealed envelope at the lawyer's office, waiting for its moment. In the meantime, I began to prepare quietly. I went through my own folders and files, gathering every piece of evidence I had of the time I'd spent caring for Mom. Hospital records, receipts from prescriptions I'd picked up, even text messages she'd sent thanking me for staying overnight. I didn't know exactly how I'd use them yet, but I knew I'd need them when the time came. Lucas thought he'd banished me to the shadows. But what he didn't realize was that shadows can be powerful. They give you cover, time to think, time to plan. And as I sat alone in my apartment night after night, the anger inside me shifted. It wasn't wild or frantic anymore. It was steady, like a low fire burning in a hearth, waiting for the right moment to spread. I let Lucas keep climbing higher on his fake pedestal, knowing all along that the higher he went, the harder the fall would be when the truth finally came out. The weeks after that family dinner were the quietest of my life. Quiet, but not empty. I realized quickly that stepping back from Lucas's chaos gave me something I hadn't had since Mom got sick. Space to breathe, space to think. At first, it felt strange, almost like I was surrendering. But then I started to notice a shift. Without Lucas constantly in my ear, without the pressure of trying to defend myself to a family that had already chosen sides, I found myself focusing on things I'd neglected for months. Work, for one. I'd been scraping by, juggling late nights at the office with Mom's care, always putting her first. After she passed, I was too drained to really focus. But now, with that fire burning quietly inside me, I poured myself into projects at work. I stayed late, volunteered for assignments nobody else wanted, and channeled all my frustration into proving myself. My boss noticed. Within 2 months, I'd been given a promotion. Nothing huge, but enough to make me stand taller. Enough to remind me I was capable of building a life that didn't revolve around Lucas's lies. And then came the money. With the promotion came a better paycheck. I tightened my spending, saved aggressively, and before long, I was able to move out of my cramped apartment into a condo across town. It wasn't massive, but it was mine. For the first time since Mom's passing, I looked around my own space and felt pride. Not the hollow pride Lucas paraded around with, but real pride, earned, solid, untouchable. But success wasn't just financial. It was personal, too. I reconnected with friends I'd pushed aside during Mom's illness. Friends who welcomed me back without judgment. They didn't care about Lucas's version of events. To them, I was still Nathan, the guy they'd laughed with, worked with, shared years of memories with. That circle gave me strength, reminding me that family wasn't only blood. It was the people who stood by you even when others turned their backs. Meanwhile, Lucas grew bolder. His arrogance blossomed in my absence. I started hearing through the grapevine that he was bragging about finally getting what he deserved, talking about renovations he planned to make to Mom's house, even mentioning trips he'd take once his inheritance came through. Each story made me shake my head. He didn't even realize he was stacking kindling around himself, waiting for the spark. Because what he didn't know, and what made it easier for me to smile through it all, was the ace up my sleeve. Months before Mom died, she'd taken me aside during one of our quiet evenings together. She had this look in her eye, tired but sharp, like she wanted to make sure I understood something important. She told me about her will, the real one. She'd gone to the lawyer, updated everything, and made sure it was airtight. "I know your brother," she'd said softly, "and I know he'll try to take more than he deserves. But don't worry, I've made sure the truth is protected." I hadn't told anyone about that conversation. Not a soul. But I carried it with me like armor, especially now. Every time Lucas sold another piece of her life or gloated about his supposed victory, I remembered Mom's words. And instead of despair, I felt calmer, stronger, because I knew what was coming. As my own life improved, work, friends, even my health as I started taking better care of myself, I realized something else. Revenge wasn't just about the final strike. It was about building myself up so high that when Lucas inevitably fell, the contrast would be undeniable. He'd be exposed not just as greedy, but as pathetic compared to what I'd become. And so, while he bragged, I prepared. I organized every record I had of helping Mom. I built a network of support outside the family that Lucas couldn't touch. I strengthened myself financially, emotionally, and mentally. Slowly, I was no longer the ghost at the table. I was becoming someone who didn't need their table at all. Lucas thought he had silenced me, but what he didn't realize was that I was rising quietly in the background, growing into someone he couldn't manipulate, someone he couldn't erase. And soon, the day would come when the lawyer finally called us in. The day Lucas had been waiting for, the day he thought would cement his victory. I was ready for it, more ready than he could ever imagine. The letter from the lawyer arrived on a Wednesday morning. I remember the exact moment because I just brewed a fresh cup of coffee and was checking emails before heading into work. The envelope slid under my door with a soft thud, plain and unassuming. But the second I saw the law firm's letterhead, my pulse quickened. Inside was a notice. The official reading of Mom's will was scheduled for the following week. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the letter, the steam from my coffee curling into the air. For months, I had been waiting for this moment, quietly building myself back up while Lucas flaunted his ownership of everything. Now the countdown had begun. But before the day arrived, something else happened. Something that gave me the edge I didn't even realize I needed. At work, part of my promotion had given me access to new responsibilities, including managing budgets and contracts. That's where I stumbled into a seminar on document authentication, a dry-sounding workshop that ended up being anything but. The speaker, a forensic handwriting analyst, demonstrated how signatures could be faked and how easy it was to spot subtle differences if you knew what to look for. My mind instantly flashed to that paper Lucas had waved in the dining room, the one with Mom's signature. After the seminar, I lingered, introducing myself to the analyst, a woman named Dr. Patel. I asked a few casual questions about personal documents, wills, and the process of verifying handwriting. She smiled politely, but when I hinted that I had a family matter involving questionable paperwork, she leaned in a little closer. "If you ever need an expert opinion," she said, handing me her card, "give me a call. You'd be surprised how many families get torn apart by forged signatures." I slipped her card into my wallet, and it felt like sliding a dagger into a sheath. Quiet, hidden, but sharp enough to pierce when the time came. That wasn't the only weapon I gained. A few days later, while sorting through my folders at home, I found a series of text messages from Mom that I had almost forgotten about. They were simple things. Her thanking me for bringing her groceries, reminding me of her medication schedule, telling me how much she appreciated me being there. One message stood out above the rest. It read, "Nathan, I'm glad we finalized everything with the lawyer today. I feel relieved knowing my wishes are clear. Don't let Lucas bully you when I'm gone. Love you." I just sat there holding my phone, staring at those words. My chest tightened, but not with sadness this time, with determination. That message wasn't just proof of my involvement in her care. It was Mom's voice reaching out from the past, confirming what I already knew. She had anticipated this fight, and she had trusted me to withstand it. Meanwhile, Lucas kept slipping. With every passing day, he grew louder about his inheritance. At one point, he even bragged to a mutual friend about planning to refinance Mom's house for a big renovation project. The arrogance was staggering. He was already spending money he didn't have, counting on a win that wasn't his. And then, as if the universe was nudging me along, Grace, the cousin who'd quietly doubted Lucas from the start, called me out of the blue. "Nathan," she whispered over the phone, "I think something's wrong. Lucas told me he had proof Mom wanted him to have everything. But when I asked to see it again, he got defensive. He wouldn't show me. He said I was disrespecting her memory by questioning him." I closed my eyes, smiling to myself. His cracks were starting to show. People were beginning to notice. By the time the day of the will reading drew near, I felt like I was standing on solid ground again, stronger than I had been since the funeral. Lucas thought he'd isolated me, but in reality, he'd only made me more focused. I had allies, quiet ones maybe, but enough. I had evidence. I had an expert waiting on call. And most importantly, I had Mom's voice, her love, and her foresight guiding me from beyond. Lucas had built his empire on lies. But I had something he would never have, the truth sharpened and ready. And when we all sat down at that long oak table in the lawyer's office next week, with Lucas puffed up like a king waiting for his crown, I was going to let him walk straight into his own downfall. The day of the will reading felt surreal. The air outside was heavy with late summer heat, and as I walked up the steps to the lawyer's office, my palms were damp. Not from nerves, at least not entirely, but from the weight of knowing this was the moment everything had been building toward. The office was old, with dark wood paneling and the faint smell of paper and leather that reminded me of libraries. When I stepped into the conference room, Lucas was already there. He was leaning back in his chair like he owned the place, one arm draped lazily across the backrest, his folders sitting in front of him like some prized possession. "Glad you could make it," he said, smirking. "I was beginning to think you decided to bow out gracefully." I didn't rise to it. I just slid into the chair across from him, nodding politely. Wouldn't miss it. Family trickled in, our aunts, a few cousins, even Uncle Harold, who lived 2 states away. The air buzzed with quiet chatter, but I noticed something different this time. Grace caught my eye and gave me the faintest nod, like a secret handshake. A small thing, but it steadied me. Finally, Mr. Sullivan, Mom's lawyer, entered the room carrying a thick sealed envelope. He was a man of precision, every movement deliberate, every word measured. He took his seat at the head of the table and cleared his throat. "We are gathered today to read the last will and testament of Margaret Hayes," he began, his voice calm but firm. "Before I do so, I understand there has been some confusion." That was Lucas's cue, right on schedule. He leaned forward, sliding his folder across the table. "There's no confusion," he said smoothly. "Mom wrote down her wishes. I have her signed statement right here. The house and savings were meant for me as repayment for the years I cared for her." He opened the folder with a flourish, pulling out the paper and holding it aloft like some kind of trophy. His eyes swept the room, daring anyone to contradict him. A few relatives exchanged uneasy glances. Mr. Sullivan didn't even blink. He reached out, took the paper carefully, and adjusted his glasses. For a long moment, the room was silent except for the faint rustle as he examined it. Then, in a tone so neutral it was almost chilling, he said, "This is not a valid legal document." Lucas's smirk faltered. "What do you mean?" "That's Mom's signature. She wrote it herself." Mr. Sullivan set the paper down, folding his hands neatly on the table. "I am familiar with your mother's handwriting as she updated her will with me personally. This signature does not match her authentic hand. Furthermore, even if it were genuine, this document lacks the necessary witnesses and notarization required to be legally binding." The silence that followed was thick, punctured only by a few gasps. Lucas's face flushed red, but he wasn't done yet. "You're wrong," he snapped. "She told me herself. She wanted me to have everything. Nathan was never around." That's when I leaned forward, my voice calm but steady. "That's not true, Lucas. And you know it." He whipped his head toward me, eyes blazing. "Don't you dare." But I cut him off, sliding my phone onto the table. "Mom told me about her real will months before she passed. She made it clear. She even texted me after finalizing it." I tapped the screen, pulling up the message, and turned it so everyone could see. "Nathan, I'm glad we finalized everything with the lawyer today. Don't let Lucas bully you when I'm gone. Love you." The room collectively inhaled. Aunts leaned closer. Cousins whispered. Grace's eyebrows shot up, and I saw Uncle Harold sit back in his chair, lips pursed. Lucas sputtered. "That doesn't prove anything. You could have." Mr. Sullivan raised a hand, silencing him. Then he opened the sealed envelope and pulled out the official will. "There will be no more speculation. This is Margaret Hayes's final notarized will and testament, witnessed by 2 parties and kept in my possession until today." He began to read. The words washed over the room like a tide, each one dismantling the lies Lucas had built. The house was to be split between both of us equally. The savings were to be divided fairly, with a portion set aside for charitable donation, something Mom had always wanted. Her personal belongings, the heirlooms, were to be shared thoughtfully, not sold off like junk. And then came the part that hit Lucas like a hammer. A clause Mom had added specifically naming me as the executor of the estate. Not him, me. Gasps rippled through the room again. Lucas's jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. Mr. Sullivan looked up from the document, his gaze cool. "Your mother was very clear about her intentions. She anticipated difficulties and made sure her wishes would be carried out without interference." I sat there, hands folded calmly, while inside I felt a deep, steady surge of vindication. Lucas had strutted, lied, and manipulated his way into believing he'd already won. But here, in black and white, was Mom's voice, clear, undeniable, and final. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I watched the smug mask slip from his face. The room stayed silent after the will was read. The kind of silence that feels heavy, almost suffocating. Lucas sat frozen, his face pale beneath the flush of anger. For once, he didn't have a script prepared. He looked around the table, waiting for someone, anyone, to defend him, but no one spoke. The family that had once nodded along to his lies now avoided his eyes, their silence louder than any condemnation. Finally, Uncle Harold broke it. "Lucas," he said slowly, shaking his head, "you sold off your mother's belongings. You lied to all of us. And for what? Greed." Lucas's mouth opened, but no words came out. He stammered something about misunderstanding and Mom's wishes, but the strength was gone from his voice. He looked smaller somehow, like the pedestal he'd built had been yanked out from under him in an instant. Grace leaned forward. "You tried to make us believe Nathan didn't care. You tried to erase what he did for her. But it's all right here. In her words. You can't argue with that." The shift was immediate. Relatives who had once whispered doubts about me now turned toward Lucas with narrowed eyes and pursed lips. He had spent months painting himself as the saint, but now the mask was gone. Everyone could see what lay beneath. Not devotion, not sacrifice, but entitlement and deceit. Mr. Sullivan cleared his throat, breaking the tension. "As executor, Nathan will oversee the distribution of assets and ensure the estate is settled in accordance with Margaret's wishes. Any unauthorized sales of her property will need to be accounted for and may be subject to legal action." He paused deliberately. "That includes jewelry and heirlooms recently removed from the home." Lucas's head snapped up, panic flashing across his eyes. "You can't. Those things are gone." I leaned forward, my voice calm but firm. "You'll have to explain that to the court, Lucas. Every dollar, every item you sold, it all has to be reported." Mom made sure of it. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. For once, he had no clever retort, no smug dismissal, just fear. The rest of the meeting wrapped quickly after that. Relatives left in clusters, whispering to each other, casting glances back at me that were filled with a mix of shame and apology. Grace gave my shoulder a squeeze before she walked out. Uncle Harold clapped me on the back, muttering, "Your mom would be proud, kid." Lucas lingered until the end, standing stiffly by the table. "This isn't over," he hissed at me under his breath. I met his glare with a steady look. "It is. Mom made sure of that." For a moment, I thought he might lash out, but instead he turned sharply on his heel and stormed out of the room. The sound of the doors slamming echoed through the office like the final note of a song. When the last of them were gone, I sat alone at the table with the will still in front of me. My hands rested on the smooth paper, and for the first time in months, I felt a deep sense of peace. Mom's voice had carried through the noise, louder than Lucas's lies, stronger than his manipulation. She trusted me, and I hadn't let her down. I gathered my things and walked outside. The late summer heat hit me again, but it felt different this time. Lighter, like a burden had been lifted. As I stood there, I glanced up at the sky, the sunlight filtering through the clouds, and whispered, "Thank you, Mom." Then I turned and walked down the steps, leaving Lucas's anger and lies behind me for good. And that was the last time he ever held power over me. Now on to the next story. Story 3. My name is Lucas. I'm 28. And if you had told me 5 years ago that my own parents would orchestrate the end of my relationship just to push my girlfriend toward my wealthy cousin, I would have laughed and said, "That's absurd." Back then, I still believed family meant loyalty, support, and maybe the occasional awkward holiday dinner. I thought my parents were proud of me or at least content with who I was. But in reality, I was just a placeholder, a stepping stone in their endless pursuit of social climbing. It started subtly enough. My girlfriend at the time, Emily, and I had been together for 2 years. We weren't rich, but we were happy. I was working at a small architecture firm, slowly building my career, and she was a teacher. We shared a 1-bedroom apartment that was far from glamorous, but it was ours, and it was filled with laughter, takeout dinners, and the occasional leaky faucet I couldn't quite fix. My parents, well, they didn't exactly hide their disappointment. Every time we visited, my mom would find a way to slip in comments like, "So, Lucas, any plans to move to a bigger firm?" Or, "Emily, have you ever considered a different career? Teaching doesn't really elevate you." My dad would just sit there, silent but nodding in agreement with every backhanded remark. First, I brushed it off. They'd always been like that. Obsessed with appearances, obsessed with money. I figured as long as Emily and I were happy, their opinions didn't matter. But then came the cousin, Ethan. My mom adored him. "He's so ambitious," she'd say. "So successful." Ethan worked in finance, drove a shiny black car that probably cost more than our apartment building, and had this smug, charming grin that made people trust him even when they shouldn't. I'd never been particularly close to him, but suddenly he was at every family gathering. My mom always made sure to invite Emily, too. At first, I didn't think much of it until I started noticing little things. The way my mom would insist Emily sit next to Ethan at dinner so they can talk about travel because he'd been to such amazing places, or the way my dad would lean over to me, half smiling, and say, "You could learn a thing or two from Ethan." I even caught my mom whispering to Emily once, her voice low, but her words just clear enough. "You know, Ethan could give you everything you've ever wanted." When Emily came home that night, she was quieter than usual. I asked her what was wrong, but she brushed it off. Still, over the next few weeks, she seemed distracted. I'd find her scrolling through travel websites late at night or staring off during dinner. My parents, meanwhile, doubled down. They invited us to a weekend at their vacation home just to relax. But when we arrived, Ethan was already there. My mom greeted us at the door, practically glowing. "Oh, isn't it perfect? Now you can all spend some time together." I remember feeling like an outsider in my own family's home. That weekend was the first time I felt it, that gnawing suspicion that something was happening behind my back. My parents were attentive to Emily in a way they'd never been before. My mom poured her wine, asked about her childhood dreams, and told her she was too special to waste her life struggling. And Ethan, he knew exactly what he was doing. He was charming, attentive, listening to every word she said like she was the only person in the room. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, but deep down I knew. The breaking point came a month later. Emily sat me down one evening, her hands trembling as she spoke. She said she needed to think about her future, that she wasn't sure we wanted the same things. And then she told me my parents had been honest with her, that they thought I'd never be able to give her the life she deserved. She didn't say Ethan's name, but she didn't have to. I could see it in her eyes. I wanted to fight for her. I wanted to scream, to tell her my parents were manipulating her, that Ethan wasn't the answer. But something in her expression told me it wouldn't matter. She'd already made her decision. So, I just sat there, numb, and listened as the life I thought I was building fell apart piece by piece. And when she finally walked out the door, my parents didn't even pretend to hide their satisfaction. That was the day something inside me shifted. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I simply walked away from Emily, from my parents, from the idea that they would ever see me as enough. I told myself I'd never look back. What I didn't know then was that walking away was the first step toward building something far greater than I could have imagined, and that one day they'd regret every single word they said. But before that day came, I had to hit my lowest point and start climbing. In the months after Emily left, the air between my parents and me was thick with unspoken judgment. They didn't just distance themselves. They seemed to actively push me further to the sidelines, like I'd failed some unspoken family test and was now irrelevant. Calls from my mom became rare, and when they did come, they were transactional. "Your cousin just got promoted again," she'd say, skipping right over any question about how I was doing. Or worse, "Ethan and Emily are going to Bali. Can you imagine?" I told them they deserve it. I'd sit there gripping my phone, my chest tight, forcing myself not to react. It wasn't just that they favored Ethan. It was that they wanted me to see it, to feel it. Every holiday gathering became a stage for them to flaunt his success and the life Emily now had. At Christmas, my parents hosted dinner at their house. I almost didn't go, but I knew if I skipped it, they'd take it as proof I couldn't handle seeing them happy. So, I showed up wearing my best suit, determined to keep my composure. The moment I walked in, Ethan was there, standing beside Emily in the foyer. She looked different. Her hair was lighter, styled in some expensive-looking way, and she wore a dress that probably cost more than my rent. My mom's voice floated from the kitchen. "Lucas, don't they look perfect together?" The words hit like a slap, but I forced a smile, murmuring something polite. Dinner was worse. My parents seated me at the far end of the table, not even next to them, while Ethan and Emily sat at the center, flanked by my mom and dad like they were the guests of honor. Conversation flowed around them. Ethan's latest deal, the property they were thinking of buying, the charity gala they'd been invited to. Whenever I tried to join in, my comments were either ignored or brushed aside with a quick, "That's nice, Lucas," before they went right back to fawning over Ethan. Halfway through dinner, my dad clinked his glass and announced that Ethan had just bought a penthouse in the city. "You should see the view," my mom added, beaming at Emily. Then, with a glance down the table at me, she said, "Lucas, maybe you can visit sometime. It might give you inspiration." The room erupted in polite laughter, but I caught the smirk on Ethan's face. It was the same one he wore back when we were kids and he beat me at something, smug, knowing he'd won. After that night, I started noticing how deep their favoritism ran. When my birthday came around a few months later, I didn't even get a call. I found out later my parents had spent the weekend at Ethan's lake house, and Emily had posted photos of them all toasting on the dock. The caption read, "Family is everything." I stared at that post for a long time, not sure if the knot in my chest was anger, sadness, or both. Then came the worst of it. My mom invited me over one afternoon, saying she wanted to catch up. Foolishly, I went. She greeted me at the door, all smiles, then led me to the living room where Ethan and Emily were waiting. "We thought it'd be nice to spend some time together," she said sweetly, but her eyes had that calculating glint. The conversation started off civil, but soon Ethan began talking about a business opportunity, a small real estate investment, and how he was thinking of letting the family in on it. That's when my mom leaned forward and said, "Lucas, maybe this is your chance to finally get on the right track. Ethan could mentor you. You could learn how to build something for yourself. Maybe then you could attract someone like Emily." She said it as if Emily weren't sitting right there, as if my worth was measured entirely by who I could date and how much I could spend on them. I sat there, every muscle in my body taut, trying not to let them see how much it stung. That day, as I drove home, I realized something. They weren't just being cruel. They wanted me to feel small. They wanted me to accept my place beneath Ethan, beneath their expectations. But if there's one thing about me they never understood, it's that I don't break quietly. And that's when the idea started forming. Not for revenge yet, but for escape. I knew I had to get away, cut every tie, and build a life so far removed from theirs that one day they wouldn't recognize me. I just didn't know yet how far that journey would take me or how much higher I'd climb. It happened on a rainy Thursday, one of those days where the sky feels like it's pressing down on you. I was at work, buried in a project deadline, when my phone started buzzing relentlessly. At first, I ignored it, but after the fifth call in a row from the same number, my mother's, I stepped outside to answer, bracing myself for whatever trivial crisis she'd cooked up. Her voice was unusually calm, almost rehearsed. "Lucas," she began, "I wanted you to hear this from me before you saw it online." My stomach sank. She paused like she was savoring the moment. "Ethan and Emily are engaged." For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. My mind scrambled to process it. The same Ethan who had hovered around her at family gatherings. The same Emily who swore she just needed time to think when she left me. My chest tightened when I asked, my voice flat, "When?" "They got engaged last night," she said almost cheerfully. "We had a little celebration. It was beautiful. You should be happy for them, Lucas. They're perfect for each other." I could hear clinking glasses and faint laughter in the background. They were still together, celebrating. I don't remember what I said next. I think it was something short, maybe just, "I see." But what I do remember crystal clear is the moment I hung up and felt the weight of it hit me. It wasn't just that Emily had moved on. It wasn't even just that she'd moved on with my cousin. It was that my parents had facilitated it, encouraged it, and now they were flaunting it like it was some fairy tale ending. By the time I got home that evening, the news was all over social media. Emily had posted a photo of her and Ethan on a balcony, the city skyline behind them, her hand raised to show off a glittering ring. My mom had commented, "Couldn't be happier for you both." My dad had liked every single post about it. And then, buried in the comment section, I saw it. A family friend writing, "Didn't she used to date Lucas?" Followed by someone else replying, "Yeah, but she upgraded." I wish I could say I brushed it off. But the truth is I sat in my apartment for hours staring at that ring. The smiles, the celebration I hadn't been invited to. My parents had chosen sides. No, they'd gone beyond that. They'd actively pushed me out of my own life. The final blow came a week later when I received an invitation in the mail. It was for their engagement party hosted at my parents' house. The card read, "Join us in celebrating the union of Emily and Ethan, a match made in heaven." There was no handwritten note, no attempt at softening the blow, just a printed card addressed to me like I was any other distant acquaintance. I didn't go, of course, but the night of the party I drove by. The driveway was lined with expensive cars, the windows glowing warm with light. I could hear music and laughter spilling into the damp night air. Through the large living room window, I caught a glimpse of my parents raising their glasses in a toast, Ethan with his arm around Emily's waist. Something in me hardened in that moment. It wasn't anger anymore. It was resolve. This was my breaking point. The moment I knew I'd never play their game again. I wouldn't beg for a place at their table. I'd build my own. And one day, it would be a table they couldn't even dream of sitting at. I turned the car around and drove away without looking back. That was the night I started my real escape plan, the one that would eventually set everything in motion for what was to come. The weeks after the engagement party felt like a long, cold winter that wouldn't end. Even though the calendar said it was spring, every part of my life seemed to slow down, like I was moving through thick mud. Work became mechanical. I showed up, I finished my projects, I went home. My apartment, once filled with little signs of Emily's presence, now felt too quiet, like the silence was pressing in on me from all sides. I didn't have much of a social circle outside of her, and the people I thought I could lean on either didn't understand or didn't want to get in the middle of family drama. The few who did check in would say things like, "You'll meet someone else," or, "At least now you know the truth," as if that was supposed to make the betrayal sting less. Didn't. Bills started piling up. I was still paying off my car, rent was due, and I didn't exactly have a safety net. My parents had never offered to help me financially, but they made sure I knew they were spending generously on Ethan and Emily's new life. My mom once accidentally sent me a text meant for Emily, asking her if she wanted my parents to cover the cost of the honeymoon as a gift. She didn't even apologize when I called her out, just said, "Oh, well, you saw it anyway. It's not a big deal." The loneliness was the worst part. Some nights I'd find myself scrolling through old photos, seeing the smile on Emily's face when we took weekend trips, remembering how my parents used to at least pretend to care about my life. Now, they spoke to me like I was some distant relative they barely knew. On the rare occasion I visited, I felt like a stranger in my own family's home. My room had been turned into a guest room, complete with stage decor. A perfect backdrop for when Emily and Ethan stayed over. One evening after another long day at work, I sat in the dark at my small kitchen table, staring at a piece of mail from my parents. It wasn't a letter, just a glossy flyer for a charity gala they were helping host. On the front was a photo of Ethan and Emily from a previous event, looking like the perfect couple. My parents had written, "You should come. It might be good for you to network," in my mom's looping handwriting. Something about that moment, the quiet, the cheap overhead light buzzing above me, the staged perfection of their world pressed into my hands, made me realize I couldn't keep living like this. I was stuck in their shadow, and they wanted me to stay there. But I wasn't going to. I started saving every extra dollar I could. I stopped going out, cut every unnecessary expense, and began researching opportunities outside the city. Anywhere I could start over where their reach wouldn't matter. At first, it was just a vague idea. Move somewhere new, get a fresh job, rebuild quietly. But over time, it became more deliberate. I looked into certifications, found a couple of business mentors online, and started teaching myself skills that could open doors. I didn't tell a soul. Not my friends, not my coworkers, and definitely not my family. The hardest part was keeping my head down when my parents kept testing me. They'd call to brag about Ethan's promotions, send me photos from family vacations I wasn't invited to, or accidentally mention how much they loved Emily's taste and decor when I visited. I learned to respond with a neutral, "That's nice," and then let the silence stretch until they were the ones scrambling to fill it. Underneath all that quiet compliance, though, I was building something. I didn't know exactly where it would lead yet, but I knew I'd get out. And I knew one day when they least expected it, I'd be standing in a place so far above their condescension that they'd choke on the sight. But first, I had to disappear. And that part was going to require more than just packing a bag. Leaving wasn't dramatic. There was no big announcement, no confrontation. One morning, I packed the essentials into my car. Clothes, a few keepsakes, my laptop, and drove out of the city without telling a single person where I was going. I left my phone number the same, but I stopped answering calls from my parents unless absolutely necessary. If they wanted to picture me stuck in the same small apartment, still struggling, I wasn't going to correct them. I moved to a coastal city 3 hours away, a place where no one knew my name or my family's reputation. The rent was cheaper and the air smelled like salt water instead of exhaust fumes. I found a small apartment above a coffee shop and started a new job at a mid-sized design firm that actually valued my work. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. And for the first time in years, I was surrounded by people who respected me for my skills, not my bank account or my last name. That was just the foundation. In the evenings, I poured every spare hour into an idea I'd been sketching out since the lowest point of my life. A side business designing high-end custom interiors for vacation homes. At first, it was just me and a few clients I found through local ads. Then, one client recommended me to another, and that one brought 2 more. Word of mouth spread faster than I expected. Within a year, I was making more from my side business than from my full-time job. By the second year, I took the leap. I quit the firm and went all in. I hired a small team, rented a proper studio space, and rebranded under a sleek new company name. We specialized in complete transformations for luxury coastal properties, and soon our designs were being featured in regional magazines. I went from scraping together bills to signing contracts worth more than my annual salary used to be. Along the way, I changed, too. I traded my old worn-out clothes for tailored suits, learned how to network with high-end clients, and started attending events I once thought were reserved for people like Ethan. My confidence grew with every deal closed, every property reveal that left clients speechless. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving. I was building something entirely my own. And then came the milestone that shifted everything. A call from an international property investor who had seen my work online. He wanted my company to handle the design for an entire chain of luxury villas. The contract was massive. More money than I'd ever imagined earning in a single project. Signing it meant not only financial freedom, but the ability to expand my business beyond anything I'd pictured when I was sitting alone in that dim kitchen years ago. I bought a home. Not just any home, but a sprawling waterfront property with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view that stretched out to the horizon. I drove past the gates every day thinking, they wouldn't believe this is mine. I started attending galas, charity events, and high-profile openings. Not as someone's guest, but as a sponsor, a name on the invitation. The funny thing is, I still kept my success quiet from my parents. They probably thought I disappeared into mediocrity, still struggling while Ethan and Emily lived the dream. Let them think that. The longer they underestimated me, the sweeter it would be when the truth came out. Because by now, I was being invited to the kind of luxury events they lived for, the ones they boasted about for months. And it was at one of those events, years later, where everything would come full circle in a way I couldn't have scripted better if I tried. But before that night came, there was one more move I had to make. The one that would ensure they'd never see it coming. The setup began without me even realizing it at first. Success had opened doors I didn't know existed. Doors my parents and Ethan had spent years trying to keep shut in my face. Every high-profile project I completed led to new introductions. Property developers, investors, event organizers, even a few local politicians. I wasn't just designing spaces anymore. I was building a network, one that reached into the very circles my family worshipped. It was during a private dinner hosted by one of my wealthiest clients, a sharp, silver-haired woman named Marianne, that I learned the piece of information that would change everything. Between courses, she leaned in and said, "Lucas, you should consider co-hosting next year's Coastal Heritage Gala. The right visibility could triple your client list." She said it casually, but I knew what that event was. It wasn't just any gala. It was the crown jewel of the social calendar in my hometown, the very same one my parents and Ethan treated like their personal stage. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, gears were turning. If I was on the hosting side of that event, it meant my name would be on the invitations, my face in the press, and my influence recognized publicly. And more importantly, it meant they would have to walk into a room where I wasn't the overlooked relative lingering by the buffet. I was the person they'd have to greet as an equal. I told Marian I'd think about it, but the truth was I'd already decided. I started investing more into my public image, professional photo shoots, press interviews, and sponsorship deals that put my company's name in places my family couldn't ignore. I even secured a partnership with a luxury brand that supplied decor for some of the most exclusive events in the region. It was subtle, but the threads were weaving together. Meanwhile, I kept hearing bits and pieces about Ethan and Emily through mutual acquaintances. Their perfect facade had cracks. A business deal Ethan mishandled, a renovation project Emily started but never finished, rumors of financial strain despite their expensive vacations. My parents, of course, pretended everything was fine, still posting polished photos of family dinners and special celebrations. It was all image, no substance. I didn't interfere. Not yet. I wanted the contrast to be glaring when the moment came, their forced smiles against the reality of how far I'd risen. By the time the invitation to officially co-host the Coastal Heritage Gala arrived, my business was thriving on an international level. I'd opened a second office overseas, hired a PR team, and secured a client roster that included celebrities and CEOs. The gala committee welcomed me like I'd been part of their inner circle for years. They even gave me free rein over the event design, which meant every guest, including my parents, would be surrounded by my work from the moment they stepped through the door. The date was set. The venue was a historic ballroom overlooking the water, dripping with chandeliers and echoing with the kind of old-world prestige my family idolized. I signed the sponsorship papers, approved the guest list, and made sure my parents' names were right there, front and center. And just to twist the knife, I extended a personal invitation to Ethan and Emily, addressed formally from my office. No explanation, no personal note, just a gesture that would leave them wondering why I wanted them there. I had no intention of telling them beforehand who else would be standing beside me that night. That detail was going to be the part that made them freeze in place when they walked into the room. The night of the gala arrived with the kind of crisp, clear air that makes everything feel sharper. Sounds, colors, even the tension in the room. The ballroom glowed under golden light, the tables set with pristine linens, crystal glasses catching the flicker of hundreds of candles. Every flower arrangement, every archway, every elegant seating area had my company's signature style woven into it. My name was printed on the entrance banner alongside Marianne's, big enough for no one to miss. I arrived early, dressed in a deep navy tuxedo, greeting guests as they filtered in. My PR team moved discreetly through the crowd, making sure the photographers caught the right angles, the smiles, the handshakes, the subtle shots of my designs in the background. The plan wasn't to humiliate my parents or Ethan outright. It was to let the setting, the introductions, and my presence do all the work. And then they walked in. I spotted them at the entrance. My parents, Ethan, and Emily. They looked the way they always did for events like this. Perfectly styled, polished, and ready to charm. But the second their eyes landed on the banner, I saw it. The split-second pause, the flicker of disbelief. My mother's smile faltered just slightly. My father's hand hesitated before shaking the event coordinators. Ethan's jaw tightened. They tried to recover quickly, but I was already walking toward them, calm and steady. "Welcome," I said, my voice smooth. "I'm glad you could make it." For a moment, none of them said anything. Then my mom forced a smile. "Lucas, you're hosting this?" "Co-hosting," I corrected, shaking Ethan's hand with a grip just firm enough to make him notice. "It's been a great project. I designed the space myself. Please enjoy the evening. There's a lot to see." I didn't linger. That was part of the strategy. Never give them the satisfaction of thinking I needed their approval. Instead, I drifted back into the crowd, introducing myself to influential guests, making sure my parents could see me moving comfortably in a world they thought I'd never belong to. Every time I glanced their way, they were standing a little stiffer, their smiles a little tighter. The moment that sealed the deal came later in the night during the charity auction. As co-host, I was invited on stage to say a few words about the cause. The spotlight hit me as I stepped up, the murmurs quieting. I thanked the guests for their generosity, spoke briefly about my company's contributions, and then, without ever mentioning them directly, I talked about how I'd built my business from the ground up, starting with nothing but determination and a vision. I could feel their eyes on me the entire time. When I stepped off the stage, Marion greeted me with a smile and looped her arm through mine. "Come, I want to introduce you to some of our biggest donors." That was when I saw their faces change completely. Because standing beside me, laughing easily, was the woman I'd married a year earlier, a woman they had never met, a woman whose elegance, confidence, and kindness radiated in a way that drew people in immediately. And just like that, they realized that the life they'd thought I could never have, the success, the influence, the love, was standing right in front of them, and I hadn't needed them for any of it. I didn't need to say a word. The revenge was already complete. For the rest of the evening, my parents moved through the ballroom like they were walking on glass. They kept their smiles plastered on, but every time they caught sight of me and my wife, Isabella, deep in conversation with the city's most influential guests, their expressions flickered. Ethan tried to mask his discomfort by over-engaging with anyone who would listen, but I noticed how few people actually knew who he was. In this room, he wasn't the center of attention. I was. Eventually, they approached us. My mother's voice was syrupy sweet, the way it always got when she was trying to save face. "Lucas, you didn't tell us you were married." Her eyes flicked to Isabella, assessing, searching for some imperfection she could pounce on. I smiled, calm. "We've been married for over a year now." Isabella runs her own art consultancy. She works with clients all over the world. Isabella, ever gracious, offered her hand and greeted them warmly. My father muttered something about impressive work while clearly trying to process that his son, the one he dismissed as a disappointment, had built a life that outshone the one they'd pushed him away from. Ethan finally spoke. "We had no idea you were doing all this." The way he said it, you could hear the quiet resentment under the surprise. I kept my tone even. "I know. That's because I didn't need to tell you. And I meant it. Every choice I'd made since that night years ago was mine, untainted by their control or approval." As the evening wound down, I noticed something almost poetic. My parents and Ethan no longer commanded the attention they used to. People gravitated toward Isabella and me, asking about my company, my projects, our travels. My parents had always wanted to be the most important people in the room, but now they were just another set of guests standing on the sidelines of an event their son was hosting. When they finally left, my mother gave a stiff hug, my father a half-hearted handshake. Ethan didn't even attempt either. They walked out into the night, their postures rigid, their faces tight, and I knew the reality would sink in on the drive home. They had gambled on the wrong person and they'd lost. As the last guests departed and the lights dimmed, I stood by the grand windows overlooking the water. Isabella came up beside me, slipping her hand into mine. "You okay?" she asked softly. I glanced at the emptying ballroom, at the space I'd created, at the life we'd built. "More than okay," I said. They finally saw me for who I really am, and for once, they couldn't do a thing about it. And with that, I turned away from the glass, leaving their world and everything it once meant to me behind for good. Now on to the next story. Story 4. I'm James, 28. And if you told me even a year ago that my own family would try to treat me like a walking ATM, I would have laughed. Not because they were perfect, far from it, but because I genuinely thought we were past all the petty manipulation. After all, I'd been out of the house for 6 years, had a decent job, paid my own bills, and helped out here and there when someone needed it. But what happened at my dad's retirement party opened my eyes to just how twisted their expectations had become, and how little they saw me as a person rather than a provider. My dad had always been a proud man, former military, strict, by-the-book kind of guy. He married my mom young and had my sister and me 2 years apart. Then, right after I turned 10, he left us. He just walked out, claiming he couldn't breathe in our house anymore. My mom cried for weeks. I still remember hiding behind the couch the day he came back to pack up his things, and how he didn't even look at me as he hauled box after box out the door. A year later, he was married to Angie, the woman he'd been just friends with at the office. And from then on, we saw him 2 weekends a month, if that. Fast forward almost 2 decades, and somehow I'd convinced myself to let it all go. Time dulls things, or maybe I just got tired of carrying it. I saw a therapist. I stopped blaming myself for things that were never mine to fix, and I learned how to live without needing anything from him. Still, we stayed in touch. Polite texts, holiday invites, the occasional awkward lunch. It was a fragile piece, but I didn't push it. So, when I got the invite to his retirement party, mailed in an actual envelope no less, I told myself I should go. Maybe it would be a moment of closure, a celebration of him finally letting go of the job that had made him so absent. Maybe we could start again in some small way. The party was at their house, a large 2-story place Angie inherited from her father. They'd renovated it a few years back, and it looked like something out of a home decor magazine. Everything was beige and symmetrical, with decorative pillows that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I arrived a few minutes early, which was a mistake. The only people there were Angie, my dad, and my half-sister Lily, who was 24 and had the personality of a condescending life coach. James. Angie greeted me with that too-wide smile she always used, like she was pretending to be excited for the cameras. You look corporate, Lily giggled. That blazer is giving serious mid-level manager energy. I smiled through it. Nice to see you too. Dad came over and gave me a firm, awkward pat on the back. Glad you could make it, son. Big day. I nodded. Congrats. Retirement's a big deal. Oh, it's more than that. Angie chimed in, practically bouncing. It's the start of a new chapter for all of us. I didn't ask what she meant. I probably should have. Guests trickled in. Former coworkers, some old neighbors, even a few of my dad's golfing buddies who gave off the exact same stiff energy he did. The whole thing was oddly formal. Champagne flutes, catered food, some guy playing soft piano in the corner like we were at a fundraiser. I kept my distance, sipped my drink, and smiled when spoken to. I tried not to feel like the only outsider in the house I used to visit as a teenager, always under the unspoken rule. Don't touch anything, don't speak unless spoken to, and be grateful you're invited. Then came the speech. Angie tapped her glass with a fork and announced that my dad had a few words. He stood at the front of the room, flanked by a banner that read "Congratulations, Richard" in tasteful gold letters. He cleared his throat and began with the usual. Thank you for coming. It's been a great 40 years. Honored to serve, blah blah. Then he smiled, not warmly, but in that rehearsed, calculated way I'd seen 100 times. As I step into retirement, he said, I've given a lot of thought to what this new phase of life should look like, and it's clear that in order to truly enjoy it, we need to make sure the household remains stable, supported, and unified. I blinked. Unified? He continued, which is why, after careful planning and discussion, we've decided that moving forward, each of our working children, that is, James and Lily, will contribute 30% of their monthly income toward the household. It's only fair. At first, I honestly thought I misheard him. I laughed, a small, confused laugh, waiting for the punchline. Lily clapped. Angie looked around the room like she'd just announced she was running for office. And my dad. He held up a manila folder, opened it, and pulled out a stapled document. "It's all outlined here," he said, walking toward me. "Standard agreement. Nothing crazy. Just sign it and we'll set up the transfers. First one starts next month." The room was quiet, but not uncomfortable. More like expectant, as if everyone there already knew this was coming. I took the folder from his hand, opened it, and scanned the first few lines. My full name, an actual payment schedule, terms like non-negotiable contribution, and even a late fee clause. I looked up slowly, every muscle in my face tightening. "You're serious?" I said quietly. Dad nodded. "Dead serious. We've done a lot for you, James. This is about respect, about supporting the people who raised you." "Raised me," I repeated, my voice low. "You left when I was 10. He looked annoyed. "Don't be dramatic." Something snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just took the contract in both hands, tore it down the middle, and let it fall to the floor. Then I walked out. No goodbyes, no explanations, just the sound of Angie's shocked gasp behind me. I drove home in silence. My hands shook the whole way, not from fear, but from the sheer absurdity of it. Who does that? What kind of parent throws a party just to publicly ambush their child with financial demands? When I finally got back to my apartment, I tossed my keys on the counter and collapsed onto the couch. My phone buzzed once, twice, then it didn't stop. Calls, voicemails, texts. At some point, I put it on silent and shoved it under a pillow. The next morning, I woke up to 46 missed calls. My dad, Angie, Lily, even some random cousin who never talked to me. The group chat I forgot I was in had over 200 unread messages. The first one I opened said, "You seriously embarrassed Dad. After everything he's done for you." I sat there staring at the screen, heart pounding, fingers cold, and that was the moment it hit me. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as a resource, and I was done playing that role. I didn't reply, not at first. I sat there for a long time just rereading that message. After everything he's done for you, what exactly had he done? Left my mom and me with no support for years. Skipped every school performance, every football game, every birthday after the age of 10. Sent me gift cards on Christmas like he was checking something off a list. And yet, somehow, in their narrative, I owed him. I spent that Sunday in a strange haze, pacing, thinking, replaying the moment with the contract over and over in my head. It wasn't just the request that stunned me. It was how choreographed it all felt. Angie's proud expression, Lily's smug grin, the way the guests didn't even look surprised. Felt like a trap I was supposed to walk into smiling. And when I didn't, I became the villain. Around noon, my phone buzzed again. It was a text from Lily. "Grow up. You make more than enough to help? Or do you just hate Dad that much?" I stared at it for a while. Then I typed a reply. "You want help? Get a job that doesn't involve buying leggings and posting about green juice." I didn't hit send. Not because it wasn't true, but because I realized something in that moment. They wanted a reaction. They wanted me angry, impulsive, chasing their approval, or lashing out so they could play the victims. That was the pattern. That's what they'd always done. So, I deleted the message. Instead, I did something better. I called my accountant. Let me back up a bit. A few years ago, I started freelancing on the side, web development, branding, a little consulting here and there. Started small, but it grew. Eventually, I formed an LLC, and with it came an accountant, Marcus, who was one of those dry, brilliant people who could find tax loopholes like it was a game. He'd once helped me legally classify a standing desk as a mobility aid because of lower back pain. The man was a wizard. When I told him the story, he was quiet for a beat, then said, "That's not normal, James." "Yeah, no kidding. Do you want me to make sure nothing's connected to them financially? Joint accounts, beneficiary clauses, any kind of dependent listings?" I hadn't even thought of that, but now that he mentioned it, "Yeah." I said, "Check everything." That kicked off what I now call phase 1. I started digging old bank accounts, insurance policies, even my online tax filings. What I found stunned me. Somewhere along the line, when I was fresh out of college and still half naive about how the world worked, my dad had added himself as a backup emergency contact and authorized correspondent for my health insurance. It wasn't financial power, but it gave him the ability to request records. I never signed anything, or if I did, it must have been buried in some paperwork I filled out while still under his roof when I briefly stayed with him after a layoff. I had Marcus help me revoke everything. Every name, every trace. Gone. Meanwhile, the group chat was still on fire. Apparently, the story going around was that I'd stormed out in a rage and humiliated the family in front of guests. No mention of the contract, of course. Just how sensitive I was. How ungrateful. How Dad was just trying to teach responsibility. And then came the real kicker. A message from Angie. We're going to give you a few days to calm down. But this is still happening, James. It's time to start acting like part of a family. There it was. The ultimatum. Veiled, but unmistakable. That night, I started writing something I never thought I'd need. A formal letter of no contact. I wasn't planning to send it just yet. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go nuclear, but it helped me think clearly. Putting it in words forced me to really see the pattern. The way they only reached out when they needed something. The way any boundary I set was seen as a betrayal. How family only mattered when it benefited them. But I wasn't done yet. A few days later, I got a call from my mom. We'd always been close. She was quiet, thoughtful, the type of person who never raised her voice but could cut to the heart of things with one sentence. I got a call from your father, she said. He says you're refusing to support him in retirement. I sighed. Mom, he tried to make me sign a contract. At his party, he literally passed it out like a menu. There was a pause. Then softly, that man never changes. I asked if she'd ever experienced anything like this back when they were married. She laughed, dry and humorless. Oh, sweetie, when I got pregnant with Lily, he wanted me to go half on prenatal vitamins. Said he didn't eat them, so why should he pay? That was all I needed to hear. The next part of the story wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was about preparing for it. I wasn't going to yell or argue or play their game. I was going to show them exactly what life looked like when the resource they thought they owned decided to walk away. But before I could do that, I received something unexpected in the mail. A certified letter, sent express. Inside was a copy of the contract I tore in half, taped together with a new signature line and a post-it note from my dad that said, "You have until the 15th. I stared at it for a long time, not angry, just cold. And that's when I made the decision. If they wanted to make this official, fine. So would I. The letter sat on my kitchen table for 3 days. Every time I walked past it, I half expected it to burst into flames. There was something so brazen about it, like they thought if they taped the pieces back together, everything else would magically reattach too. Trust, respect, the years we never talked about. But this wasn't about nostalgia or family anymore. This was about ownership, and they thought they still had a claim to me. I scanned the letter and emailed the copy to Marcus. His reply came that same afternoon. Legally unenforceable, ethically disgusting. Want me to write a response? I told him to hold off for now because this wasn't just about legality anymore. It was personal. And if they wanted to make it official, I'd treat it like a hostile business transaction. Cold, calculated, surgical. So I began phase 2. The first thing I did was block them. Not forever, but enough to get their attention. Dad, Angie, Lily, socials, phone, even email. Silence. Not a word of explanation, no angry message, no warning. Just absence. Like a switch had flipped and the power line went dead. Next, I pulled up the shared drive Dad and I used back when I'd helped him digitize his old photos and military records. Back then, he claimed he didn't trust the cloud, so he made me upload everything onto my account. He never bothered to make backups. So, I downloaded everything, zipped it into a private archive, and deleted his access. Was it petty? Maybe. But it was the first time in my life I stopped feeling like I had to be the bigger person. And you know what? Felt good. The real blow came a week later through a mutual contact. One of Dad's old coworkers who'd always liked me more than him. I learned that Dad had planned his retirement finances assuming I'd contribute. He hadn't saved properly. No pension beyond the basics. Angie had quit her job 3 years ago to focus on interior wellness, which I guess meant painting inspirational quotes on walls and taking bubble baths with herbal salts. And Lily? She hadn't paid a single utility bill in her life. Apparently, she still lived in the guest house rent-free and called it her creative sanctuary. According to the coworker, Dad had even floated the idea of co-signing a small business loan for her for an online coaching course she hadn't even designed yet. It was like watching a slow-motion financial car crash, and I was supposed to be the airbag. When the 15th came and went, I waited. No payment, obviously. No response either. Not that they could reach me, but the silence had a tension to it, like the breath before the punch. And I knew my dad too well. He wasn't going to accept this quietly. He wasn't used to not getting his way. Sure enough, the next wave hit on the 17th. A letter arrived not from Dad, but from his lawyer. I opened it with shaking hands, not because I was scared, but because I couldn't believe how far they were willing to go. Inside was a formal demand for contribution, citing oral agreements, familial duty, and even emotional restitution. Marcus called me 5 minutes after I forwarded him the scan. "This is laughable," he said. "They're bluffing. They want to scare you into complying." "Can I respond?" I asked. "Do you want to?" I paused. "Then yeah, but not with words." What came next was a bit of a project. Over the next few days, I compiled every receipt, every bank transfer, every gift and donation I'd given them over the last 10 years. Rent I covered when Lily forgot, repairs I paid for after Dad's water heater burst, groceries, gas, medical co-pays when Angie's back went out and she insisted insurance was too complicated. I made a spreadsheet, labeled everything, added dates, amounts and notes, and color-coded it. The total, $42,713.17. And that didn't even count the unpaid tech work, car rides, or emotional labor. But I kept it clean, precise, professional. Then I drafted my own letter with Marcus's help, but all in my voice. It started like this: "Dear Dad, since you have decided to treat our relationship as a financial contract rather than a familial one, I've outlined my prior contributions to this household for clarity. You'll find the itemized list enclosed. If you believe it's appropriate to formalize our relationship into one of debtor and creditor, please let me know. I'd be happy to begin negotiations for repayment of the outstanding balance. Otherwise, consider this my final word on the matter." I didn't send it right away. I let it sit in a draft folder for 2 days. And then, just as I was about to print it out and put it in the mail, something unexpected happened. Lily showed up unannounced at my apartment. I opened the door and there she was, standing in high-end athleisure, holding a soy latte in one hand and a reusable shopping bag in the other. Her hair was perfect. Her expression wasn't. "What are you doing here?" I asked flatly. She pushed past me without waiting. "You're being so dramatic." I closed the door behind her slowly. "You just showed up at my home without calling. That's dramatic." She spun around, clearly annoyed. "Dad is losing it. He hasn't slept in 3 days. Angie's talking about selling the house. You have to fix this." I stared at her. "Fix what?" "This mess," she snapped. "This thing you've started. Just pay what he asked. It's not that hard." I laughed quietly, bitterly. "You realize he tried to bill me for being his son, right?" She rolled her eyes. "It's not about that. It's about loyalty, family." "No, it's about money," I said, walking past her. "And I'm done pretending it isn't." "You think you're above us now?" She spat. "Just because you live in a fancy building and make 6 figures?" "No," I said, turning to face her. "I think I've just stopped letting guilt buy silence." She opened her mouth to say something else, but then her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, went pale, and without another word, stormed out. I didn't know what the message said, but whatever it was, it changed her. The letter went out the next day, certified, tracked. I watched the delivery confirmation come through that Friday at 3:43 p.m. And for the next 72 hours, silence. Until Monday morning when I got the call from my dad's lawyer. The first words out of his mouth were, "He's considering legal action." I took the call in my kitchen, staring out the window while the lawyer on the other end tried to sound professional and intimidating at the same time. He spoke slowly, as if expecting me to panic, to beg for leniency. "Mr. Holloway," he said, "your father has asked me to inform you that unless you agree to the terms outlined in the household contribution contract by the end of this week, he is considering pursuing legal action." I let him finish. Then I asked calmly, "Legal action? For what exactly?" "For declining to pay an arbitrary fee to a man who abandoned his parental responsibilities 2 decades ago." There was a pause. He must have realized I wasn't going to be easy. "Well, he claims there was an oral agreement made in good faith that you would support him and his family upon his retirement." I actually laughed. "Good faith?" I said he ambushed me with a contract at his retirement party like it was a wedding proposal in front of guests with a fake smile and a legal document in a folder. "And you're telling me I acted in bad faith?" He tried to salvage the call. "It's not uncommon for adult children to assist their parents financially." "Correct," I interrupted. "And it's also not uncommon for those parents to have earned that support through decades of love, stability, and presence, which he didn't provide. You want to talk good faith? I've paid over 40 grand helping them over the years, and I have the records. So, if you want to talk about financial burdens, I can make this very expensive for them in return." The call ended shortly after that. Marcus called me a few hours later, sounding unusually energized. "Just got the transcript. He has no case. I even checked to see if there were any precedents involving family contribution contracts. The only examples that even remotely come close involve parents providing sustained support to an adult child, not the other way around." "So what now?" I asked. "Now," Marcus said. "Now we wait, and if he tries anything, we file a cease and desist. If he keeps pushing, we go for harassment. Your father's all bark, no bite. This is him trying to bluff his way back into control. And for once, I wasn't scared of that bark, because I knew the truth. He needed me, not for love, not for connection, just for money. I was a line item in his retirement budget that had suddenly gone missing, and now the entire equation was falling apart. A few days passed. No calls, no letters. But the quiet wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like the air before a storm. Then, on Thursday, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. "I know I messed up. Please, let's talk." It was Lily. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel anything when I saw her name. Not guilt, not obligation, just tired. "Still," I replied. "What changed?" She answered almost immediately. "Dad and Angie are selling the house. The mortgage is bigger than he said, and they used part of Mom's life insurance for Lily's coaching brand. They thought you'd help cover the difference." I blinked. Mom's life insurance? My mom, who passed away 3 years ago, had a modest policy. When she passed, she left me a handwritten note in a locked box with a few things she wanted me to have. She never mentioned leaving money to them, but if they had access to it, I made another call to her old financial advisor. He remembered me. "Yes, James, I remember. Your mother's policy was small but very clear. You were the sole beneficiary. But shortly after her passing, your father submitted paperwork indicating that he was still her legal spouse. It delayed the payout for months." "Wait, but they were divorced." "Correct. But your mother never updated her policy. Because of that, there was a legal dispute. Your father received 40%. You received the rest." I sat there stunned. 40%. That must have been 10,000, maybe 12. He spent it on Lily's coaching business. I felt something deep in my chest harden. That was my mother's final gift to me, the last tangible part of her life, and they siphoned part of it away like it was a stray coin they found in a couch cushion. That night, I typed out a final message and sent it to Lily. "I'm sorry things are falling apart, but I am not responsible for the decisions Dad made or the ones you benefited from. I am not your safety net. I am not your bailout. I am not your backup plan. I am your brother, and that used to mean something. But if you and Dad and Angie continue to treat me like a wallet with a pulse, then this is the last conversation we'll ever have. I truly hope you figure things out." She didn't reply. Days passed, then weeks. I didn't hear from any of them again until the email came. It was short, just 3 sentences from Angie. "We've sold the house. Moving into a rental. Richard is not doing well. I hope you're proud of what you've done. No greeting, no signature. Just passive-aggressive bitterness wrapped in faux sincerity. I didn't reply because the truth is I wasn't proud. I wasn't happy. This wasn't satisfying revenge or some grand triumph. It was tragic. A family that chose money over connection, ego over love, control over kindness. But I was relieved. Relieved to finally have clarity, to have proof that walking away was the right decision. That no matter how much they huffed and puffed and threw their titles around, dad, stepmom, sister, they never truly acted like family. Not when it counted. And so I moved on. I kept building my business, traveled more, and reconnected with people who actually valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. Therapy helped, so did time. 1 year later, I got a small envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a card. Just 3 words written in a shaky hand. You were right. It wasn't signed, but I knew the handwriting. I still don't know what made him send it. Pride? Guilt? Desperation? Maybe all 3. But I didn't need anything from him anymore, because the contract was never real. Now on to the next story. Story 5. Hey, this has been weighing on me for a while, and I think it's time to get it off my chest. The whole situation with my family was beyond frustrating, but I never expected it would end up like this. I'm still kind of in shock, honestly. So, sit back, because this is going to be one of those you won't believe it stories. First, a little bit about me. My name's Oliver, and I'm the older sibling. Growing up, I always felt like the one who had to do the heavy lifting in our family, while my younger brother, Liam, got away with everything. I'm 26 now, working a regular 9-to-5 job, and I'm still figuring things out, but I've always been the reliable one. I don't mind it, honestly. I was taught that hard work pays off, even if it's a slow burn. Liam, on the other hand, is 22, and let's just say he's never been a fan of hard work. If there's one thing Liam knows how to do, it's how to manipulate situations in his favor. And somehow he's always managed to get everything handed to him on a silver platter. Whether it's new gadgets, designer clothes, or trips, our parents were always quick to give him what he wanted. Meanwhile, I was left to do the boring stuff. Things like taking care of the house, running errands, and doing all the work that they didn't feel like dealing with. Our parents, dad and mom, were strict when it came to me. They always told me I had to earn my place and that life wasn't going to be easy. It was their favorite line, honestly. I never really understood why they treated me differently than Liam. They'd always say they wanted me to be responsible and level-headed, which, fine, I get that, but it was always on their terms. If they needed something done, it was me they'd turn to. If there was a big decision to be made, I had to take the lead. But when it came to Liam, he was treated like some kind of prince. No matter what he did, it was always like he could do no wrong. This dynamic was something I learned to deal with over the years. Sure, I didn't get all the flashy things, but I had something they didn't. Independence. I had a job at 16, I worked my way through school, and I've always managed to keep things together. But Liam? He never lifted a finger. It drove me crazy seeing how they'd bend over backward for him. Things really started to hit the fan around his graduation. It was a big deal for our parents. They made it out to be some kind of grand achievement. Liam had barely passed his classes. He scraped by. He never put in the effort, but they were so proud of him. And what did I get? Well, you'll find out. The day of the graduation celebration, we had a small gathering. Nothing extravagant, but they sure made it sound like the world was watching. They had a cake with his name on it, balloons everywhere, and all sorts of decorations. It was as if this was the most important day of the year. And for them, I guess it was. I don't want to sound bitter, but it's hard not to when you've been in my position. It was like they were so focused on Liam that they didn't even consider the things I'd done. I kept things running smoothly around the house. I helped pay bills when Dad's job didn't cover everything, and I dealt with the grocery shopping, the laundry, and all the other stuff that comes with keeping a household together. Then came the presents. Liam had gotten a shiny new car, a present our parents had barely been able to afford. In fact, I later found out they had taken out a loan to cover the cost. I wasn't angry about the car itself, but the fact that they couldn't afford it, yet they still went ahead and bought it for him. Well, that part stung, especially when they barely acknowledged the sacrifices I'd made. Then it was my turn. I tried to push the feelings aside. I didn't want to be that guy, the one who complains just because he doesn't get a shiny gift. but what I got was, to put it lightly, a slap in the face. I sat down on the couch waiting for my turn, trying to hide the anxiety bubbling up inside me. It was like I already knew what was coming. Mom smiled at me, but it wasn't the warm, loving smile I was used to. It felt different, almost condescending in a way. "Oliver," she said, her voice soft, almost too sweet. "We know you're so responsible, and we just wanted to make sure you have what you need for your future. We thought this would be practical." I tried to smile back, trying to mask the frustration building inside me. I didn't want to seem ungrateful, but I was already bracing myself for disappointment. I had to keep it together. Dad handed me a small box. It felt light, and when I opened it, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. Inside the box was a stack of household cleaning supplies. Paper towels, sponges, dish soap, and the like. My heart sank. There were no words for me at least. I stared at the contents for a few seconds, my mind trying to process it. "Mom? Dad?" I started, but my voice faltered. "What is this?" Dad chuckled, slapping his knee. "Well, Oliver, now you can be even more useful around the house. You've always been so responsible, and this is just another way to show how much you contribute." I blinked, trying to understand. Was this a joke? Liam, sitting next to me, was grinning ear to ear. He looked at me with this smug, almost mocking expression. "Yeah, Ollie, now you can keep things nice and clean. You always seem to be the one doing the chores anyway." My stomach churned. I knew this was going to be bad, but I didn't expect it to sting this much. They were giving my brother a brand new car. A car, and me? Cleaning supplies. I swallowed hard, but my throat felt tight, like I was choking on something I couldn't quite name. I stood up, not wanting to sit there any longer, not wanting to look at the pile of cleaning supplies in front of me. "I'm going to head out for a bit," I said, my voice cold. "I need some air." Without waiting for a response, I grabbed my jacket, packed a bag, and left the house. I didn't know what I was hoping for, but I didn't want to be there anymore. I could hear my parents calling after me, but I didn't look back. I don't know how long I walked that night, but it felt like hours. I just kept putting one foot in front of the other, not really caring where I was going. It wasn't until I reached a small bench near the park that I finally stopped to sit down, my mind racing. I should have been furious, but I was also tired. Tired of always being the responsible one. Tired of being the one to do everything right, only to get ignored or dismissed. I took out my phone, scrolling through a few messages from friends, trying to distract myself from the mess that had just happened. I didn't even want to go back home, but where else could I go? The house was all I had, even though it felt more like a prison than a place of comfort. I finally decided to call a cab to take me to a friend's place, just to get some space. When I got there, I told my friend Jake everything that happened. Jake listened quietly, but I could see the frustration in his eyes. He knew what I'd been going through with my family. "You don't deserve that, Oliver," Jake said. "You've been busting your ass for years, and they just keep using you. You're not a damn maid." I let out a sigh, feeling the weight of the past few years hit me all over again. I don't know what to do anymore. I've given everything to them, and Liam? He doesn't appreciate anything. He's spoiled, and it's like they think he can do no wrong. Jake was quiet for a moment, and then he said something I hadn't really thought about. "Why don't you leave? For real. Go get a job, start over somewhere else. You don't need them, man. You've got this." It hit me like a ton of bricks. He was right. I didn't have to stick around. I didn't have to keep being their backup plan, the one they turned to when they needed help. It was hard to imagine leaving everything behind, but in that moment, it felt like it might be the only way to break free. I spent the night at Jake's, and when I woke up, I knew what I had to do. It wasn't just about the gift anymore. It was about my entire life, about the way my parents treated me compared to Liam. So, I packed a bag, grabbed what I needed, and went to my parents' house to let them know I was leaving. They weren't home at the time, which only made the whole situation feel even more like I was walking away from a chapter one could never go back to. When they got back, it didn't take long for them to realize something was off. I was halfway through the process of packing up my things when I heard their car pull into the driveway. My heart skipped a beat as the front door creaked open. Oliver. My mom's voice echoed down the hallway, sounding surprised. Where are you going? I walked into the living room holding my bag. I'm leaving, Mom. What? Her voice faltered. Where are you going? You can't just leave like this. I kept my tone steady, but I could feel the tension building. I've been carrying this family for too long. It's time for me to go. You and Dad don't need me, not really. You've always had Liam for everything else. The look on her face was one of disbelief, like she couldn't process what I was saying. Oliver, you know we depend on you. You've been so helpful. And now this is the thanks we get. I didn't let her guilt trip me this time. I've been helpful because you've never given me a choice. You've always expected me to clean up after everyone. Liam does whatever he wants, and you keep giving him everything. Well, I'm done. Dad stepped into the room looking almost confused. What do you mean you're done? You're going to leave the family after everything we've done for you? You've done nothing for me, Dad, I replied, keeping my voice calm. Liam gets a car and I get cleaning supplies. That's how much I mean to you. Mom's face twisted in something close to panic. You don't understand. We've been making sacrifices for your future. You're not seeing the bigger picture. I shook my head. No, Mom. I'm done seeing the bigger picture. You've never seen me. You've only seen what you can use me for. But I'm not doing this anymore. I turned to leave, but Liam stepped into the doorway. A smug expression plastered on his face. Wow, Ollie, leaving already? Guess you can't handle the family spotlight, huh? I mean, I just got a brand new car for graduation. What do you have? A bag of cleaning supplies? He laughed, and I could feel my blood boiling. Shut up, Liam, I said through gritted teeth. You don't have a clue. Mom shot him a glare but then turned back to me, her voice a bit more frantic. Where are you even going to go? You can't just leave us like this. I didn't answer her immediately. I simply walked out the door, leaving everything behind. It wasn't until I was in the cab heading to a small apartment I'd rented that same morning that I felt the weight of what I'd just done. For the first time in years, I felt free. The following year was a blur. I found a 9-to-5 job in sales just to keep things steady, but my real plan was always the side hustle. It took time, a lot of hard work, and plenty of late nights, but after a few months, I started seeing the results. I was making money online, not just a little, but enough to start thinking bigger. I was no longer dependent on my family, no longer living in the shadow of my brother. But as I started to succeed, that's when the calls started. I had gone from living paycheck to paycheck, relying on my parents, to a self-sufficient adult with financial freedom. I wasn't a millionaire yet, but the sense of independence and control over my life was worth more than anything. It felt like a huge victory every time I checked my bank balance, seeing the numbers climb. But of course, as my success grew, so did the need for my family to reach out. It all started with a text from my mom. At first, it was casual. She was trying to sound like everything was normal. Hey Oliver, how's the new place? I hope you're settling in well. Have you been able to keep busy with work? I could tell this was a thinly veiled attempt to see if I'd bite and talk about what I was doing. So I responded, keeping it simple and vague. I'm doing well. Work's keeping me busy, but it's going good. That was it. A couple of days went by before I heard from her again. This time, it wasn't just a check-in. The tone was different. Oliver, your dad and I have been thinking. We're really proud of you. You've always worked hard, and we just wanted to tell you that we're here for you no matter what. I could feel the tension in her words. It was almost like they were testing the waters, hoping to open the door for something more. I knew exactly what they wanted, but I kept my reply neutral. Thanks, Mom. I appreciate it. A week later, I got another message. This time, it wasn't from her, but from Liam. Hey Ollie, hope you're doing all right. I know things are a bit tense between us, but I just wanted to check in. How's work going? I've been thinking about you. Liam thinking about me? That was new. He had never cared about anything except himself. I didn't want to be petty, but I also didn't want to pretend like everything was fine. So I replied with the same vague answer I'd given Mom. Everything's good. Work's going well, and I'm staying busy. A couple of days later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was my mom calling. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. "Hello, Oliver, honey, it's Mom," she said, sounding almost sweet. "I hope you're doing well. Your dad and I were just talking. We were wondering if you could come by soon. We really miss you, you know. It's not the same without you here." My stomach dropped. Felt like a trap. They hadn't missed me before, at least not in the way they were claiming. It had been months since I left, and all of a sudden, they wanted to act like they cared. I could practically hear the desperation in her voice. "I don't know, Mom," I said, trying to sound neutral but not giving in. "I've got a lot going on here. Things are different." She was quiet for a second, and I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. I waited for her response, knowing this was coming. "Well, it's just that with everything that's been going on, we've been struggling a little. You know, with your brother's car and all. And with the bills stacking up, it's been a lot for us lately. We could really use your help." There it was. I knew it. They had been in debt, taking out loans to buy Liam his car, and now they were struggling to keep up. They hadn't thought of how they would manage long-term, and suddenly they were remembering I existed. But it wasn't because they were concerned about me. It was because they needed something. My heart tightened. "I don't know what you expect from me, Mom. I'm not coming back. I've built my life here." I heard her voice falter. "We know you're doing well, Oliver. We just thought you could help us out a little. That's all. Just to get back on our feet." I didn't respond right away. I was processing what she was saying. How easily they expected me to just drop everything, return to the house, and fix their mess. "Listen, Mom, I'm not coming back. You and Dad have made your choices. You decided to put everything into Liam. You can't just come to me when things get hard. You can't expect me to fix it." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then finally, my mom spoke, her voice almost pleading. "Oliver, please. We've made mistakes, but we're trying. We really need you." I wasn't sure what I felt anymore. Anger, sympathy, resentment. A mix of all of those. I had worked so hard to get away from that place, and now they were trying to manipulate me into coming back to be their backup once again. "I can't help you," I said, feeling my resolve solidify. "I've worked too hard for this. I'm not going to put myself back in that situation." That was the first of many calls. They came more frequently over the next few weeks, each time more desperate. Mom and Dad, each with their own version of pleading, reminding me how much they needed me, how much they'd sacrificed for me. They even mentioned Liam, talking about how his grades were slipping now that he had the car and how he couldn't handle the pressure of adult life. But every time I refused, they pushed harder, until the calls stopped coming. The silence was almost worse than the constant begging. I knew they were upset. I knew they were angry, but that didn't stop me from living my life. Then one day, I got a message from Liam. This time it was different. It wasn't just about checking in or saying he missed me. It was a cry for help. "Oliver, I need you to help me. Things are getting out of hand. Dad's been really upset lately, and Mom, she doesn't know what to do. We're in serious trouble." I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure if I should even reply. What did he want from me? What was he trying to pull? Finally, after a few minutes, I decided to send a short reply. "What do you want from me, Liam?" His response came quickly, and the urgency in his words was clear. "I'm serious, Ollie. We're in debt. We can't handle the car payments. I don't know who else to turn to." I could feel my heart sink. This wasn't just about them anymore. This was about a family falling apart. And Liam, the one who'd been handed everything on a silver platter, was finally realizing how bad things had gotten. I sat there for a moment, staring at the message on my phone, my fingers twitching with frustration. Then I typed out a reply. "Liam, you don't get it, do you? This isn't my problem." The words were harsh, but I felt like I needed to say it. It wasn't just about money or material things anymore. It was about principles. I wasn't going to be their fallback savior. They put me in a position where I was the one who had to sacrifice everything. I wasn't going to let them do it again. I stared at the screen for a few more seconds before I added more. You and Dad put yourselves in this mess. I told you guys when I left I was done. I'm not coming back to fix things for you. Don't ask me to. I stared at the message, feeling a strange sense of relief. I had to stand my ground. There was no way I was going to let them guilt-trip me into coming back. Just as I had sent it, my phone rang. It was from my mom. The last thing I wanted to do was talk to her right now, but the call kept ringing, and it seemed like I was going to have to face it. I picked up with a deep sigh. "Hello, Oliver?" she started, and I could already hear the crack in her voice. She was trying to keep her composure, but the desperation was obvious. "I don't know what to do. You need to come back. Your dad. He's not handling things well. He's been so upset, Ollie. I'm just worried about him. And Liam, well, he's not doing well at all. His grades are slipping. He doesn't know how to manage everything. It's just getting worse." I clenched my jaw, my patience wearing thin. "Mom, I don't care about their problems. I have my own life now. I told you I wouldn't come back. You chose to spoil Liam and ignore me for years. Now when things are hard, you want me to drop everything and fix it." "No." There was silence on the other end of the phone. I could tell she was hurt by my words, but I wasn't about to apologize. Not this time. "Mom, you need to figure this out on your own," I continued, my voice growing more firm. "I'm not responsible for your financial mistakes. I'm not your backup." Her voice trembled. "I'm not asking you to fix everything, Oliver. We just thought maybe you could help us out just a little. It's hard, and we don't know who else to turn to." I could feel my temper rising. "You thought you could just ignore me when I needed help, and now that you're struggling, you think I owe you? What happened to your perfect family that didn't need me? The one where everything was supposed to be fine as long as Liam had everything handed to him." Her voice cracked. "It's not like that, Ollie. We've made mistakes, but we're trying to do better now. Please, just come home." I felt a bitter laugh rise in my throat. "I'm not coming back, and I'm certainly not going to keep bailing you out. You can't just call me when it's convenient for you. You made your choices." "Oliver, please," she started, but I interrupted. "No, I've heard this all before. I'm not your solution. You want to fix things? Start with Liam. He's the one who's got the luxury car, the one who's never worked a day in his life. You want to know what adulting looks like? Stop using me as your crutch and figure it out yourself." I could hear her sobbing now, the tears coming through in her words. "You don't understand, Ollie. You don't understand how hard it's been. Please." I felt the pang of guilt in my chest, but I pushed it away. I couldn't let myself fall back into their trap. "I understand perfectly," I said, my voice hardening, "but I'm not going to give in. I'm not going to put my life on hold to fix yours. You need to face the consequences of your choices." I hung up before she could say anything else, letting out a long breath. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the frustration that had been building up over the last few months. They had always seen me as someone who could be manipulated, someone who could be pushed into action whenever they needed me. But not anymore. I knew it wouldn't be the end of it. I knew they'd try again. My mom had always been persistent when she needed something, and my dad was the type to sulk and try to guilt-trip me. But I wasn't going to give in. I had worked too hard to get to where I was, and I wasn't going to let them drag me back into that life. About a week later, as I was getting ready to leave work, I saw a notification pop up on my phone. It was from my dad. "We've been talking and we've made some changes. We're sorry for how things have been. Your mom and we just want to help you. We miss you and we need you. Please, Oliver, come home. Let's fix things. We'll work together." I stared at the message, my heart hammering in my chest. I wasn't sure what to feel. A part of me wanted to be angry, but the other part of me wondered if they truly meant it. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I sat there in my apartment replaying everything in my mind. The way they had treated me, how they had never shown a fraction of this supposed love when I needed it. Now, after everything, they were suddenly begging for my help. I wasn't buying it. A few days passed, and I didn't hear from them again. I started to think they might have finally given up. Maybe they had learned their lesson. Maybe they realized that they could no longer rely on me, that I wasn't their emotional bank account, their last resort. Then another message came, but this time it wasn't from my mom or dad. It was from Liam. "You're really going to leave us hanging like this? What's the point of family if you don't help when we need it? You've been selfish. We're struggling and you're just going to let us drown? I thought you were better than this." There it was again. The manipulation, the guilt, the same old tactics. I wasn't surprised that it was Liam this time. He had always been the one to play the victim when things didn't go his way, the one who thought the world should revolve around him. But this time, I wasn't going to let it work. I sat down, typing out my response slowly, making sure every word hit the mark. "You don't get it, Liam. I'm not your backup, and I'm not your savior. You're the one who always gets everything handed to you, and now that things aren't perfect, you want to blame me for your problems. I don't owe you anything. You're grown just like I am. It's time you learn to stand on your own 2 feet. You've had your life handed to you on a silver platter, and now you want me to come back and fix everything? That's not how this works. Don't ever contact me again unless you're ready to be honest about what you've done." I hit send, my finger trembling slightly. I'd never been more sure of a decision in my life. But that wasn't the end of it. A few weeks later, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't pick it up, but something told me I had to. When I answered, it was my dad on the other end. "Oliver, we know we messed up," he said, his voice more fragile than I'd ever heard it. "Your mom and we've been trying to fix things, and we're sorry. We were wrong. We don't want you to think we only care about what you can do for us. We want our family back. We want you back." The words hit me harder than I expected. There was a part of me that wanted to believe them, to think that maybe, just maybe, they were truly sorry. But the logical part of my mind reminded me of everything they had done to me, how they had taken me for granted, used me, manipulated me into being the one to clean up their messes. I had been their backup plan for far too long, and I was done. "I'm not coming back, Dad," I said, my voice steady. "Not now, not ever. You've had your chance, and you've used it all up. You can't just expect me to forget everything just because you're sorry now. You made your choices. I'm making mine." There was a long silence on the other end, and I could hear the sound of him breathing heavily. I understand," he finally said, his voice defeated. "But please, just know. We're here if you ever change your mind." I hung up the phone and sat there in the quiet of my apartment, feeling a strange sense of relief. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was truly free. It's been a year now since that last conversation. My parents have tried to contact me a few times, but I've stayed firm. I'm not going to let them back into my life, and I'm not going to feel guilty about it. Over the past year, I've been building something for myself, something that will ensure I never have to rely on anyone again. My income is growing steadily, and in a few more months, I'll be at the point where I can truly call myself financially independent. And to be honest, a part of me knows that when they find out I've gotten to that point, they'll come knocking again. But this time, I won't be there. So, Reddit, what do you think? Am I wrong for refusing to help them? I'm honestly torn between feeling like I did the right thing and feeling guilty about leaving them behind. It's hard because they're family, but after everything, I just don't know if I can forgive them. Let me know your thoughts. Now on to the next story. Story 6. Your kids don't need to come to Christmas. It's adults only, my mom said. My brother snickered. Exactly. They don't belong at the table. I just smiled. That night, I donated every gift I bought for his kids. At 9:01 a.m., my mom texted, "They're crying. Where are the gifts?" I coldly replied, "I always knew my family wasn't perfect, but nothing prepared me for what happened last Christmas." My mom called me in early December. She always called around that time of year, acting like she was running some elaborate charity gala and not just the family Christmas. Her voice was sharper than usual. She got right to the point. Your kids don't need to come to Christmas. It's adults only. She said it like she was doing me a favor, like excluding my 7-year-old and 4-year-old from the only family gathering they know was somehow progressive. Before I could say anything, I heard my brother laughing in the background. Exactly. They don't belong at the table. He snickered like it was some inside joke I wasn't part of. I just said, "All right," and hung up. I didn't give them the satisfaction of hearing what I really thought. I sat there on the edge of the bed, phone still in my hand, and stared at the wall for a good minute. Rachel came in with a laundry basket and saw the look on my face. "They said what?" she asked me once I told her exactly what they said. She dropped the basket. Her response was short. "Then we're not going." No hesitation. No, maybe they didn't mean it like that. No defending them. Just clarity. And that's why I married her. Now, here's what they didn't know. 4 years, my family made a sport out of underestimating me. I didn't flash wealth. I didn't post pictures of vacations or fancy dinners. So they assumed that I was broke. They made comments. My mom once joked that I should bring paper plates as my contribution to Thanksgiving. My brother liked to throw in subtle digs about me being cheap or simple. What they never asked, because they never cared, was what I actually did for a living. I run an e-commerce business. Took years of struggle to get off the ground, but now it's thriving. Very few people know how well. I don't show it. I don't drive anything flashy. I don't wear watches that scream money. But last year I decided to do something different. For once, I wanted to surprise my family with something big. Something they wouldn't expect. I had gifts picked out months in advance. My brother's twins were getting limited edition Lego sets that were already sold out in most places. My mom was getting that silk scarf she once drooled over in a boutique window in Nashville. She'd walked away saying it was too expensive and out of her league. I had gone back the next day and bought it. My dad, who pretended he didn't care about sports anymore, was getting a signed baseball from his childhood hero. And my brother, who kept whining about not being able to afford a decent smartwatch, was getting one that I knew he couldn't afford, even on sale, the real deal. And then they banned my kids. That night, Rachel came with me to the garage. I pulled all the wrapped gifts from the trunk. She didn't even have to ask. We drove across town and donated everything to a local shelter that pairs with families in need. The woman at the front desk almost cried when she saw what we brought. She said there was a single mom with 2 boys who had been hit hard that year and wouldn't be getting anything. I told her the Lego sets would go to them. Felt good. Not the self-righteous kind of good. Not revenge. Just right. Christmas morning at home was calm, cozy, and simple. Our kids didn't know they'd been excluded. They had pancakes shaped like snowmen, warm cocoa, and gifts from us that they loved. No drama, no tension. Just laughter and toys scattered across the living room. Then at exactly 9:01 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from my mom. "They're crying. Where are the gifts?" No hello. No Merry Christmas. Just entitlement and confusion. I replied without hesitation. "You said it was adults only." No response. For the first time in my life, I think I left her speechless. What she didn't know, not yet, was that things weren't going back to how they used to be. Not this time, not after this, and definitely not after what happened next. 2 days after Christmas, my mom called. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again. Then my brother texted me something so perfectly him. I had to show Rachel. "Real mature move, Glenn. Hope your kids enjoyed those Lego sets meant for mine." I didn't reply. I wasn't in the mood to argue with a man who once threw a tantrum because I forgot to bring mustard to a cookout. Rachel just shook her head. "You know what he's really mad about? He just realized this year you actually brought the good stuff. That's the thing. They never expected much from me. So when the gifts stopped showing up, it wasn't the absence that hurt them. It was what it revealed. That maybe, just maybe, I'd been holding back all along. And I had. I'm not proud of it, but for years I sent money quietly. I covered part of my parents' rent every month. $600 like clockwork. They never asked, not directly. My mom just hinted about tight times, and your father not working as much, and this apartment being more than we thought. So, I helped because I could, because I thought that's what good sons did. That week, I canceled the recurring payment. I didn't say a word about it. On New Year's Eve, they invited me to dinner. They said we should all talk like it was a business meeting, not a family. Rachel asked me if I wanted to go. I said yes, not to make peace, but because I wanted them to finally hear the truth. We left the kids with a sitter and showed up 15 minutes late. My mom opened the door with that fake, tight-lipped smile she uses when she's pretending nothing's wrong. My brother was already sitting at the table, arms crossed, staring at the TV like he couldn't be bothered. We sat. Small talk started. I let them get through the charade. Then my mom asked, "So, what happened this Christmas?" I looked at her. "You banned my kids from a family holiday. What did you expect?" She opened her mouth, but I kept going. "You said it was adults only, so we stayed home and I donated the gifts. Someone else's kids had a good Christmas this year." My brother laughed under his breath. "Of course you did." I turned to him. "You know what's funny? I was gonna buy you a car. A used one, reliable, clean title. You've been whining for years about how yours keeps breaking down. I had it lined up. All you had to do was not be a jerk. But you couldn't manage that." His face went white. He tried to act like he didn't care, but I saw it. I saw the calculation happening in real time. My mom spoke again. "Glenn, we didn't mean to offend. We just thought." "No, you didn't think. You assumed. You always do. You assumed we'd show up, be polite and smile through it. You assumed I was broke. You assumed I wasn't worth respecting until I proved I had money." She looked hurt. I didn't care. Rachel reached into her bag and pulled out a small white envelope. She placed it on the table. "That's your rent statement. The one we've been paying for almost 5 years. $600 a month. Every single month." My dad, who had been silent this whole time, finally spoke. "You paid our rent?" I looked at him. "Yeah, I did. Quietly. Because you said you were struggling." They were quiet for a long time. My brother looked uncomfortable. My mom blinked like she was trying to reset the conversation. "You should have told us," she said finally. "Why? So you could pretend to be proud of me?" They didn't have a response to that. We stood up. Rachel grabbed her coat. "I told them we wouldn't be coming to Easter or Mother's Day or anything else." My mom called out as we left, "You're really cutting us off?" I turned back once. "You did that when you told me my kids weren't welcome." We left, got in the car, and drove home in silence, both of us knowing something had shifted. They thought this was about Christmas. They had no idea how much deeper it went. The calls came daily for a while. First it was my mom, then my dad, then my brother, who alternated between pretending nothing happened and trying to guilt-trip me with vague half-apologies like, "We're still family," and "You know how mom is." I ignored most of it. Rachel blocked them. She said if I ever wanted to talk to them again, that was my decision. But she wasn't going to keep watching them twist me up like they always did. After a week of silence from my end, the tone changed. One afternoon, I got a long text from my mom. A full essay. She finally admitted that maybe the adults-only comment wasn't the best idea, that it had come out wrong, that she just wanted a peaceful, mature holiday and didn't think I'd take it so personally. I didn't reply. 2 hours later, another message from her. "But it's not fair to punish your father for my mistake." That was the moment I realized how deep it ran, how much they all depended on the version of me who never pushed back. Because they weren't just missing the gifts. They were missing the money. Without the $600 a month I had been sending, they were suddenly feeling the pressure. Rachel was the one who looked into it. She called the landlord number listed on their old rent receipt and got someone on the phone who thought she was our accountant. Turns out they'd already gotten a late payment notice. "You think they're more upset about not seeing the kids or about losing their safety net?" she asked me later. I didn't have to answer. Meanwhile, my brother went full damage control. He texted me a picture of his car battery on the ground along with the words, "Guess I'm walking to work now. Thanks." Then, "Hope your kids don't end up with your attitude." Then a few hours later, "Sorry, that was out of line. Just stressed." I deleted everyone. See, my brother was the golden child. He always knew the right thing to say to our parents. He joked with them, agreed with them, gossiped with them about other relatives. He knew how to play them. And when I stepped back, he probably thought he could just move into my place in the family machine. Reliable, helpful, always available. But the thing is, he couldn't afford to. He'd been relying on me for more than he liked to admit. I'd covered his part of a group gift more than once. I paid off a speeding ticket once just to avoid the headache of him calling me every day for a week. I let it all slide. Not anymore. Mid-January, I got an email from my dad. Subject: a favor. He asked if I could temporarily help with rent until things smoothed over. That's how I knew they still didn't get it. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a hiccup. It was the inevitable crash after years of quiet disrespect. They thought this was about a few toys, a Christmas dinner. It wasn't. It was about the way they looked at my family, at my wife, at my kids, like we were the side story in a narrative that only centered them. Rachel saw it years ago. I didn't. But now it was crystal clear. I forwarded the email to her. She replied with one sentence. Want me to draft your response? I said, no. I already had it in my head. I just hadn't written it yet. But I was about to. And this time they were going to hear me. I didn't write back to my dad right away. I waited 3 days, not to punish him, but because I wanted to be sure I didn't soften. I've done that before. Got mad, stood my ground, then slowly let guilt undo everything. Not this time. When I finally replied, I kept it simple. I told him I wouldn't be covering the rent anymore. I told him I needed to prioritize my own family. No bitterness, no insults, just facts. I even said, I hope things work out for them. He didn't respond. Instead, 2 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was my cousin Jen. We hadn't talked in years. She was younger than me, had moved out of state after college, and mostly stayed out of the family circus. She said she heard some things and just wanted to know if I was okay. I asked what she'd heard. Apparently, my mom had started telling people I'd cut them off completely, that I was acting like I was better than everyone, and that Rachel had poisoned me against my own family. That last part got me. Rachel, who sat through awkward dinners, who always made sure our kids brought something to share, who once loaned my mom money for a dentist appointment when I was out of town, was now the villain. I thanked Jen for the call, and right before we hung up, she said, you know, they're probably not telling people the part where you paid their rent for 5 years. Then she added something unexpected. Also, your brother. He's been selling stuff online. Someone I know bought a watch off Facebook Marketplace last week. It had your initials engraved on the back. I almost dropped the phone. I had the smartwatch I was going to give him engraved. GH. Short, subtle. I checked the receipt. It was the one. He had broken into the trunk of my car a few days before Christmas. I'd left it unlocked in their driveway when I stopped by for 5 minutes to drop off something I forgot. I never thought to check after that. I drove straight to the shelter where I donated everything. I spoke to the same woman. She told me they had everything cataloged. Both Lego sets, the scarf, the baseball. But the watch? It never made it there. Rachel was fuming. I was quiet, angry quiet. So I called him. He answered like he'd been expecting it. He didn't even try to lie. It was just sitting there, he said. I figured you weren't going to give it to me anyway. You stole from me. You weren't going to use it. What's the difference? The difference, I said, is that now I know exactly who you are. I hung up and blocked his number. That night, I did something else I never thought I'd do. I sat down with Rachel, opened up our budget, and did the math on everything I used to spend on my family. Gifts, money, holidays, extra expenses, all of it. Then I took that total and made a plan. Every dollar I used to spend on them, we would now spend on us, on our kids, on travel, on the house, on things that actually mattered. Because I finally saw the truth. They never hated me for not giving enough. They hated me for what I could give and the fact that I kept it to myself. And now that they knew, they wanted access. But access was over. The door was closed. And this time it was staying that way. Took them a few weeks to realize I wasn't bluffing. No calls, no texts, nothing on birthdays, not a single message when our youngest lost her first tooth and Rachel posted a photo. That used to be the kind of thing my mom would comment on with 1,000 emojis. This time, silence. But then something shifted. In early March, a letter showed up. Not a card, not a note. A full letter handwritten in my mother's cursive. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, the kind she saved for special occasions. I almost didn't open it. Rachel said to burn it. I waited a day, then curiosity won. It was 5 pages long. She opened with a memory. Me at age 9 getting lost at a museum. How she cried when she couldn't find me. How she prayed out loud in the middle of the building. How she swore she'd never take her eyes off me again. Then it turned. She said I was cruel. That I'd embarrassed the family. That I'd let money make me arrogant. That Rachel had turned me into someone cold. That I'd taken joy away from the only people who ever loved me unconditionally. I read it once, then again. There was no apology, no ownership, just a veiled plea dressed in guilt. Rachel found me staring at the letter an hour later. She didn't even have to ask what it said. "Burn it," she said again. I nodded. She lit a match in the sink, held the corner of the paper to it, and watched it turn black and flake into ash. We didn't speak. The next week I got an email. This time it was from the landlord of my parents' building. Not a mistake. He said they'd given him my email directly. That rent had been unpaid since January. That my mom said I was their financial power of attorney and had always handled this stuff. He attached an invoice for $1,800 and asked how I'd like to proceed. That was the moment I realized how far they were willing to go. They hadn't just burned bridges. They were trying to rebuild them with my name and wallet. I called the landlord and told him the truth. That I had no legal ties, that I hadn't sent a dime since Christmas, and that he should never contact me again. He sighed, said it wasn't the first time he'd seen something like this. That night I sat down with Rachel. We talked for hours about the kids, about the house, about the future. Then I told her something I hadn't said out loud yet. I want to move. Out of state. No, just away. Fresh start. No more surprise visits. No more driveway pop-ins. No more being a 20-minute drive from people who only remember I exist when they need something. She smiled. I've been waiting for you to say that. So we started looking. New schools, new neighborhoods, a new chapter. I didn't tell my parents. Not yet. They still thought this was a fight. They didn't know it was a farewell. We moved in June quietly. No announcement, no Facebook posts, no mass texts. We packed everything over 2 weeks and hired movers for a Thursday morning. By the time the sun set, we were 2 counties away in a home with more trees, less traffic, and not a single memory of them in the walls. I didn't leave a forwarding address. The only person in the family who knew was my cousin Jen. She kept it to herself. Rachel and I poured everything I used to give them into our new life. We took the kids to a cabin in the mountains that summer. I upgraded my home office. Rachel finally started her Etsy business after years of talking about it. We were lighter, freer. You don't realize how much weight you're carrying until it's gone. In July, on my birthday, I got a package. No return address, just a white box taped shut. Inside was a photo album. Every page had pictures of me growing up, family holidays, birthdays, sports games, school events. But someone had gone through with a marker and blacked out Rachel's face in every photo she was in. In one, they scribbled over my kids, too. At the end of the album, a note was tucked in. You used to belong to us. Now you belong to her. Rachel didn't say a word. She picked it up, walked outside, and dropped the album into the trash bin. Then she came back in, poured herself a glass of wine, and kissed my forehead. They were spiraling, clinging to something that didn't exist anymore, trying to hurt me, guilt me, shame me, but it was too late. None of it worked. In September, my brother emailed me. The subject line was just, "Dad's sick." I stared at it for a long time. Then I hit delete. The guilt didn't come. The hesitation didn't come. I thought about all the moments they could have chosen kindness, respect, and decency and didn't. I thought about the time they banned my kids from a family Christmas and laughed about it. I thought about the watch he stole and sold. I thought about the rent I paid in silence and the accusations they sent in writing. And I thought about the faces of my children on Christmas morning. Warm, safe, loved. I never answered the email. 2 weeks later, Rachel and I took the kids to the coast for the weekend. We watched them chase waves and build crooked sandcastles. That night, over dinner, I looked at her and said, "I'm done for good." She didn't ask who I meant. She already knew. We didn't cut ties with family. We just chose to stop bleeding for people who kept holding the knife. And now I get to spend every extra dollar, every extra hour, and every ounce of energy on the only people who ever saw me for who I am. A husband, a father. Not a wallet, not a backup plan, not a doormat, and not theirs. Not anymore. It's been 3 months since the move. No contact, no drama, no unexpected mail, no weird emails, no fake emergencies. Just peace. I didn't realize how loud it had been, how much mental space they took up, until it all went quiet. My mornings are slower now. I wake up, make coffee, pack the kids' lunches, and walk them to the bus stop with Rachel. We laugh more, we sleep better. Rachel's Etsy shop is booming. She launched a custom holiday line, and her pre-orders for winter already beat what she made all last year. I'm handling the back end for her in my spare time, website tweaks, payment integrations, inventory. It's the first time we've really built something together, and it feels good. The business I run is still growing. Last month was my highest earning quarter since I started. I treated myself to something small but meaningful. A guitar I used to dream about owning when I was broke. Rachel told me I deserve 10 of them. The kids are thriving. Our oldest made a new best friend on the first week of school. Our youngest finally started sleeping through the night again, something she stopped doing months ago during all the family tension. She seems lighter, too, like even she can feel the shift. We carved pumpkins last night, just us 4. Music playing in the background. Rachel burning her weird cinnamon candles that somehow smell like actual pie. No rushing to someone else's house. No wondering if this year I'd be ignored or insulted. I don't miss them. Not anymore. I thought I would. I thought I'd wake up some mornings and feel the ache of not being part of the family anymore. But the truth is, I'm part of one now. A real one. One we built. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel like I'm living around the edges of someone else's story. This is mine, and it's just getting started. Now on to the next story. Story 7. Don't come to Mom's birthday party, Dad wrote coldly. The whole family doesn't want you there. You're a loser. I smiled and wrote, so, you chose money over your son? I canceled everything, including the restaurant deposit. They were giggling in the chat, but they have no idea what will happen next. My name is Bruce. I'm 38 years old, married, and have 2 children. Jake, who is 9, and Ellie, who will be 6 this summer. We live just outside of Indianapolis. I run a small but growing remodeling business. It's not flashy, but it's honest work and I'm good at it. Life isn't perfect, but it's mine. Or at least it was mine until that text blew the fuse on everything I thought I knew about family. It happened on a Tuesday morning. I just dropped the kids off at school and stopped by a local coffee shop I like to go to before I go to work. I was standing in line when my phone buzzed. It was the family group chat titled, Mom's Birthday, flashing at the top of my screen like a warning I didn't know I needed. I tapped it open, expecting the usual chaos about cake flavors and who had forgotten to RSVP. Instead, I saw this, don't come to Mom's birthday. My father wrote coldly, the whole family doesn't want to see you, you loser. I stared at it, my thumb hovering over the screen. No emoticons, no soft landing, just a line hanging there like a trapdoor. I didn't say anything out loud, but I smiled. Not because I thought it was funny, but because I finally had confirmation. For years, they had tiptoed around their disappointment in me. The tension at family dinners, the way they'd sigh when I talked about my work as if they were making fun of me, and the real kicker, the way they treated my wife, Marissa, like she was an inconvenience. But this message, that was pure honesty. Cruel, unfiltered honesty. I scrolled up. Nothing leading up to it. Just a few messages about party decorations and someone joking about getting matching shirts for everyone. Then this. I typed a line back. So, you chose money over your son? Then I deleted the restaurant reservation I'd made 3 weeks earlier. A fancy little Italian place that my mom used to rave about. I booked a private room and even arranged for the owner, who owed me a favor from a renovation job, to prepare a special menu just for her. Marissa didn't even know. I wanted to surprise them all, remind them that I was still family, that I hadn't given up on them. Then came the reaction. My cousin Brent replied first with a bunch of laughing emoticons. Then Lisa, My oldest sister said something like, "You really are delusional." Jenna, my youngest sister, the only one I thought might still have my back, just liked the message and stayed quiet. Then came the meme. My name photoshopped onto a clown, sent by my own uncle. This one actually made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it confirmed exactly what I needed. I was done. What they didn't know was that I'd been keeping receipts. Not the literal kind, but the kind that pile up in your head over the years. Every phone call they didn't return. Every time they made me feel like the black sheep because I didn't chase a corporate job or fake a marriage to look good on Facebook. Every little betrayal I tried to swallow for the sake of family. They laughed in that chat thinking I'd sulk. Maybe turn up anyway to apologize like I always did. But not this time. They had no idea what to expect. They thought they'd knock me down. What they really did was cut the chain. And I had plans. Oh, I had plans. After that group chat, I didn't say another word. Not on the chat, not to my dad, not to anyone in that family. I let them have their moment. I didn't block them. I didn't delete the thread. I wanted them to see me online, active, living my life. I wanted them to wonder what I was doing. And slowly, I began to set the stage. First, I told Marissa everything, not just about the message, but about the years leading up to it. She listened, no interruptions. And when I finished, she didn't say, "I told you so," although she could have. She just nodded and asked me a question. "What do you want to do?" That was the moment I knew I had something most of my family would never have. Someone to back me up no matter what. I told her the truth. I didn't just want revenge. I wanted to show them that I never needed their approval, their conditional love, or their false concern. I wanted to show them what happens when you burn the only bridge that ever led to anything real. We set to work. I contacted my old friend Mason, who runs a social media agency. I asked him to help me build a new website for my renovation business. A real brand, a complete relaunch. Not just a landing page with my phone number, but videos, testimonials, a booking system, everything. Within a week, I had customers messaging me directly from Instagram. It tripled my business in a month. Then I called my cousin Ryan. Not the one on the group chat. He left the family years ago after his dad stole money from him. We'd kept in touch quietly. He lives out in Asheville, North Carolina. Owns a few properties and always said there was room for me if I ever wanted to move. He'd even offered me a deal on one of his houses a while back. I never followed up until now. I told him I was thinking of moving. A fresh start. He didn't hesitate. He said one of his tenants was leaving in 3 months and the place was mine if I wanted it. A 4-bedroom on the edge of the mountains with space for the kids, a workshop for my tools, and peace. Meanwhile, I was playing nice on social media, posting pictures of me and Marissa at events, me coaching Jake's little league team, Ellie's dance recital and family dinners, always smiling, always together, never once mentioning the chaos behind the scenes. And my family saw it. They watched. I know they did because one day Lisa sent me a private message. "Glad to see you're okay. We all miss you." I left it on read. Then Mom texted, not in the group chat, but directly, "Still your mom, Bruce. Can we talk?" It was tempting. I almost answered, but I waited. I needed more time. This wasn't about haunting them. This was about showing them what they'd thrown away. The party came and went. I didn't show up, of course, but I heard about it. Jenna, the one who liked the laughing message, got in touch a week later. She said the energy was strange, that people kept bringing me up, that Dad was quieter than usual. Good. Let that sink in. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had one last piece to put in place, and it would hit harder than anything I could have said. About 2 weeks after Mom's birthday, the silence finally broke. I hadn't texted anyone. I didn't block them. I wanted them to watch. I knew they were watching. And then it happened. I was working late on a kitchen renovation when my phone buzzed. It was a message from my dad. Not on the group chat, just him. "Your mom's been crying. You've made your point. Enough is enough. No apology. No ownership." Just the tone he always used, like I was a teenager who had got a bit too loud and it was time to get back in line. That line, "You've made your point," was the emptiest thing I've ever read. He thought it was about proving something. He still didn't get it. None of them did. So I didn't reply. Not even a dot. 3 days later, Jenna texted me again. This time it wasn't just a text. She asked for a meeting. Said she wanted to talk in person. No pressure, just her. I waited a few hours before replying. Told her, okay, a coffee, neutral ground. We met in this little cafe on the south side where no one in our family ever went. I got there early, sat by the window and waited. She came in 10 minutes late. No makeup, hair in a messy bun, jumper too big. She looked tired. Not physically tired, tired in a way I recognized. She sat down, didn't even order anything. First words out of her mouth. You were right, Bruce. I didn't say anything at first. I just sat back and let her speak. And she did. She told me about the birthday. How it hadn't been fun. Not even close. Mom spent most of the night pretending to be happy, clinking wine glasses and laughing too hard. Dad hovered like a shadow, pacing, checking his phone, clearly expecting me to walk through the door with some grand apology. But I didn't. And the longer the night went on, the more awkward it got. Lisa was arguing with Mom about the decorations being too last minute. My cousin Brent made a joke about family therapy and got a cold stare from Mom that shut the table down. It wasn't a party. It was a pressure cooker, and my empty chair was burning a hole in every conversation. Then Jenna said something that took me completely by surprise. After I left the chat, people started talking. Like really talked. Apparently, some of our cousins who I hadn't spoken to in years started asking what the hell had happened. Why everyone was laughing at me 1 minute and acting like I just disappeared the next. Brent, of all people, later messaged Jenna and admitted that the clown meme was weak. He said he didn't know the whole story. He was just following the vibe of the group. Cheap, basically, but at least he owned up to it. Even Uncle Ron chimed in, the same uncle who'd barely said 2 words to me at family gatherings. Turns out he remembered when I helped fix his garage door during a storm one summer without asking for anything. He told Jenna that no one else in the family had ever done that for him. And then she told me something I'll never forget. Mom said you were the one who always needed help. But now that you're gone, everyone realizes that you were the one who always gave help. That hit me. Not because I needed the recognition, but because I hadn't realized how much I was giving to people who never gave back. Jenna was quiet after that. She didn't ask me to come back. She didn't try to defend anyone. She just looked at me and said, they only loved you when you were quiet and useful. And that was the moment it all clicked. I wasn't the problem. I'd never been the problem. I was just the easiest person to blame when the system started to break down. They built their version of family on silence, image, and obedience. The moment I stepped out of that mold, they turned on me. Not because I hurt them, but because I made them look at themselves. I left that cafe feeling strange. Not angry, not vindicated, just clear, like a fog had finally lifted. And as I drove home, the plan that had been simmering in the background finally began to take shape. The house in Asheville would be ready in 2 months. And I was taking my wife, my children, and my peace with me. The next thing I had to do was make sure they saw me go. After talking to Jenna, I didn't go home angry. I didn't call anyone to vent or start typing one of those long messages I had never sent. I just sat in my truck in the parking lot of the coffee shop and stared at the gray sky, feeling clearer than I had in years. There wouldn't be a big confrontation, no final blow-up. I didn't want it to be like that. What was coming wasn't a moment. It was a movement. Slow, deliberate, and unmistakable. I started with the company. The new branding Mason helped me implement had already doubled my client base. Now I went further. I invested in a small ad campaign, hired a part-time administrator to handle bookings and billing, and started documenting projects in short, clean videos, before and after shots, time-lapse footage of renovations, walkthroughs with happy clients. I didn't say anything about my family, but it was all there, the success, the growth, the respect, and people noticed. Cousins who had ignored my texts for years started following the business account. Lisa started liking my posts again, always the ones about the kids. Brent even commented on one, just a thumbs-up emoji under a post about a finished kitchen. But it was the digital equivalent of a knock on the door. Quiet, awkward. I left it alone. I also posted a photo that was nothing special unless you were paying attention. A stack of boxes with a caption that simply said, "New chapter loading. No location. No explanation. Just enough." Jenna texted me the next morning, "Wait, are you moving?" I didn't answer. Marissa and I spent our evenings sorting, selling, and packing. We donated half the furniture and sold the rest online. Jake and Ellie helped pack their own toys, and we let them paint on the boxes. Their excitement made it easy. We told them it was a new beginning, and kids don't carry the same weight that we do. They don't see what's being left behind, only what's in front of them. Every once in a while, Marissa would stop and ask, "Are you okay?" And every time, I'd say the same thing, "I'm better than I've ever been." The Asheville house would be ready in 6 weeks. Ryan sent me photos. Fresh paint, polished floors, a backyard with a maple tree big enough for a tire swing. It was everything I never knew I wanted. Quiet, green, wide open, and no one around to tell me who I had to be. A week before the move, I did one last thing. I opened up the family group chat and scrolled through the messages. Most of them had returned to normal. Photos of someone's baby, plans for a summer barbecue, links to restaurants. My name hadn't been mentioned in weeks. It was as if I never existed. I didn't post anything. I just quietly disappeared from the chat. And that was the beginning of the real avalanche. Jenna called first, straight to voicemail. Then came Lisa's text, "What's going on?" Then Mom, a full paragraph this time. "We heard you're moving. Can we talk before you leave? Please. I don't want things to end like this." I didn't answer. I let it sit. Then Dad texted again, "You're overreacting. Enough is enough." Still no apology. Still the same tone. Like I owed them something. Like the years I spent trying to earn their love didn't matter the second I stopped trying. But they weren't the only ones watching. Something was happening behind the scenes. One of my aunts, who hadn't spoken to me in years, sent me a note thanking me for helping her neighbor with a roof leak 2 summers ago. I barely remember doing it. She ended her message with, "You always show up when people need you." Then Brent sent me another message, longer this time. He admitted that the meme was cruel. He said he got caught up in the energy of the group and didn't realize how messed up it was until after. Said he respected what I was doing with my life. Said he wished he had the guts to cut ties too. I read it twice and then archived it. I didn't need an apology. I needed distance. The move was set for a Friday. We rented a truck, loaded it ourselves with a few close friends, and didn't say a word to the family. No goodbyes, no forwarding addresses, just gone. But I did leave one last breadcrumb. Just before we pulled out of the driveway, I posted one last photo, a shot of our empty living room, sunlight on the floor, and a caption that said, "Sometimes leaving is the only way to grow." Then I turned off my phone. What they didn't realize was that I wasn't running. I was just finally walking in the right direction. We hit the road around 8 a.m. It was overcast, cool, perfect weather to leave everything behind. Marissa was driving the SUV with the kids. I followed in the rented truck. Windows down, one arm hanging out, no music. I didn't need a soundtrack. The hum of tires on asphalt and the silence between towns was enough. The drive to Asheville took just under 8 hours, but it felt like minutes. No second-guessing, no what-ifs, just a strange sense of peace that grew deeper the further we got from Indiana. Like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders without me even noticing. Ryan met us at the new house with a spare set of keys and 2 pizzas. The house was better in person. A big wraparound porch, real trees that didn't look like they were suffocating in the suburbs, and space inside. Space to breathe, space to build without shadows. The kids ran through the hallways claiming rooms and yelling about how we had to paint Ellie's walls purple like the flowers. Marissa leaned against the counter and smiled. She didn't have to say anything. I knew she felt it too. That night, after the kids passed out on sleeping bags and half-built bunk beds, I sat on the porch with a beer and turned my phone back on. Messages poured in. I scrolled through them slowly, like turning the pages of a book whose ending I already knew. Mom had sent another message. "Please don't shut me out. This isn't how families work things out." Lisa had become more dramatic. "You're tearing this family apart. Over what? A text. Even Jenna had cracked a bit. You could have said goodbye. We're your family, Bruce. This isn't you. But the one that stood out was from Dad. Just one line. You're acting like a child. I actually laughed. After all, that was the best he had. He was still trying to put me down, to put me back into that role where he was in charge and I was the disappointment. I didn't respond. I didn't rage or explain or argue. I just deleted every single message, deleted the thread, and blocked all their numbers one by one. Quietly, cleanly, finally. No dramatic goodbye, no bitter speech, just gone. We spent the next week settling in. I slowly transitioned the business. New clients, new licenses, new jobs already lined up thanks to Ryan's connections. Marissa took a remote position at her old company and even started planning a little garden out back. The kids made friends. We met neighbors. It wasn't instant magic, but it was ours. No one here cared about my last name or who my parents were. They just knew me as Bruce, the guy who fixed decks and played catch with his son in the backyard. Then a strange thing started to happen. I started getting messages from old friends back home, people I hadn't talked to in years. Hey, your mom was crying in church last Sunday saying you cut off the whole family. What happened? Your sister posted a long thing about forgiveness. Are you okay, dude? Your dad is telling everyone you had a breakdown. What's going on? That was their narrative. That I'd lost it, that I needed help. Because they couldn't admit the truth that I had broken something they assumed I'd always be too loyal to walk away from. But I hadn't lost anything. I'd finally found peace. And nothing they could say, no rumor they could spread, could take that away from me because for the first time in my life, I wasn't living in reaction to them. I was just living. 6 months in Asheville changed everything. It wasn't just a new beginning. It felt like someone had quietly handed my life back to me. The mornings were calmer. The kids were thriving. Marissa glowed in a way I hadn't seen since we were in our 20s. And for the first time in my life, there was no weight on my chest when I woke up. No pressure to explain myself. No silent scoreboard on which I was constantly losing. Business was booming. I hired a small crew, turned the garage into an office, and was even offered a contract to remodel a set of vacation cabins up in the hills. Jake made the travel baseball team, and Ellie was invited to perform a solo in her dance recital. We were busy in all the right ways. Tired at the end of the day, but the good kind, the kind that comes from building, not surviving. I didn't think much about my family back in Indiana. Honestly, it was like they belonged to another life. Every once in a while, I'd get a message through a mutual friend. Someone who said they'd heard my dad wasn't doing well, or that my mom had started asking around about Asheville. I ignored it. People like that don't change. They just change tactics. But then came the twist I never saw coming. One Thursday morning in late October, I got a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. It was Lisa. Her voice was hurried, a little panicked. Dad had a stroke. He's out of the hospital, but he's not walking right. Mom can't make it on her own. They're moving to Asheville. They rented an apartment. She says she wants to make things right. Can we get together? I didn't call back. I played the message once, deleted it, and didn't even mention it to Marissa. 2 weeks later, I saw them at the local grocery store of all places. I was in the cereal aisle with Ellie. She was choosing between 2 boxes. One with a cartoon tiger, the other with some glittery unicorns. When I heard someone behind me say my name, Bruce, I turned and there they were. My mother looked thinner than I remembered her, older, less together. She was holding a shopping basket as if it weighed 50 pounds. My father was next to her, leaning heavily on a cane, eyes dull. But what struck me most wasn't how different they looked. It was how familiar they still felt. The same tension. The same expectation that I'd drop everything just because they showed up. Ellie looked up at me. Who are they? I looked at her and smiled. No one, sweetheart. Let's go. We walked right past them. My mom called my name again, softer this time, but I didn't turn around. My dad didn't say a word. He just watched me. I could feel it. His confusion, his frustration. Not because I ignored it, but because for the first time in my life I wasn't theirs. After that, they tried again. Lisa texted. Jenna tried calling. Then my mom sent an email. It was long, tangled, half guilt, half nostalgia. She talked about birthdays, old memories, how families shouldn't break up like this. She said they were trying to start over and maybe we could find a new beginning now that we were neighbors. I read it twice. Then I archived it. The old me would have felt torn. I would have written and rewritten a response, wondering if I was doing the right thing. But not now. I had finally reached a place they couldn't follow. They thought I was cutting them off out of spite, but the truth is, I cut them off to protect the life I built. The one they never respected until it didn't include them. And here's the part one never expected. My cousins started reaching out to me, not out of obligation, but because they saw what was happening. Brent called me one night out of the blue. He said he was sorry not just for the group chat, but for everything. Said he respected what I had done. Then my aunt, my dad's sister, texted me to say that she always thought he was too hard on me. But she didn't speak up because that's just the way he was. She wished she had. And one by one, people started to see it. That I hadn't left the family. I outgrew it. Now most evenings, I sit on my porch, beer in hand, kids laughing in the yard, Marissa reading next to me. And somewhere a few blocks away, my parents sit in a rental house they can barely afford, trying to figure out how they lost their son when they thought they were punishing him. They wanted me to come crawling back to them. Instead, they followed me here. But now all they can do is watch from afar. Because the best revenge isn't anger. It's the happiness they can't be a part of. Now on to the next story. Story 8. Sister and parents kicked me out of the house and took my money. That's all we need from you, said Dad. So, I calmly left, and a week later, my phone exploded with 51 missed calls. My name is Jacob, and I never thought I'd be writing about this on Reddit. Honestly, I never thought anything like this could happen to me, but here I am, still trying to make sense of how my own family, my parents and my sister, stabbed me in the back without hesitation. It's taken me a while to talk about it. At first, I thought I could just move on, let it go, and tell myself they weren't worth the anger. But the more I sat with it, the more I realized I needed to tell the story. Not just to get it off my chest, but because maybe someone else needs to hear it. Maybe someone else will ignore the warning signs like I did. Because if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that the people closest to you can hurt you the most. And sometimes they don't even feel bad about it. It all started after my apartment was robbed. They took everything of value. Laptops, watches, even some old family jewelry I had. The insurance covered some of it, but it wasn't just the money. The feeling of knowing that a stranger had been in my home going through my things made me sick. I didn't feel safe there anymore. So, I decided to sell the house and figure out my next move. I make good money online, so I wasn't in a bad financial situation, but I didn't want to rush into a new place just yet. My parents offered to let me stay with them for a while. They made it sound like they were doing it out of kindness, but now, looking back, I wonder if they had a plan all along. First, everything was fine. My sister still lived there, and we never really got along, but I kept to myself. I had my own setup, my own internet, and I was still making money. My parents knew that I wasn't struggling. They knew I had savings. What I didn't realize at the time was that knowing I had money made them feel entitled to it. Started small. My mom made comments about how family helps family. My dad reminded me how lucky I was to have a place to stay while I figured things out. Then one night, my dad casually mentioned that my sister had found a used car she liked. He looked me right in the eye and said it wouldn't be a bad idea if I helped her out. I laughed. No way. I didn't think much of it at the time, but the change was immediate. My sister suddenly started acting even more entitled than usual, throwing tantrums about how she deserved a car, how I was selfish, and how they took me in when I had nowhere else to go. My parents fed into it. The tension in the house was unbearable. I started avoiding them as much as I could, staying in my room, going out more, and trying to keep my distance. Then one night, I came home and everything changed. My stuff was on the front lawn. For a second, I thought maybe there had been some kind of mistake. But then I saw my dad standing in the doorway with my mom behind him. "That's all we need from you," he said. Then he slammed the door in my face. I just stood there, my mind racing, trying to process what had just happened. Then it hit me, the safe. I had $30,000 in cash locked up in a safe in their house. It wasn't all my money, but it was a good chunk of it. I had kept it there because I didn't want to leave that kind of cash in my car or in a hotel. I ran to look, but it was gone. I felt my stomach drop. My hands clenched into fists, but I forced myself to stay calm. I looked at the house, at the dark windows, at the people inside, probably celebrating what they had just done. I could have banged on the door. I could have yelled at them. I could have called the police, but I didn't. I grabbed my stuff and walked away like I didn't care, because I wanted them to think that I was defeated. I wanted them to think they had won. I didn't go to a hotel. I went straight to my brother's house. Unlike our sister, he was actually a decent person. When I told him what had happened, he didn't even look surprised. He just shook his head and said, "Yeah, that sounds like her." Then he gave me a number. "Call this lawyer. Do it now." I didn't hesitate. I made the call. A week later, my phone exploded with 51 missed calls. My parents, my sister Margaret, and even some relatives I hadn't spoken to in years because they had just received the news and they had no idea what to expect next. The calls didn't stop. I let them go to voicemail at first and watched as my parents, Margaret, and even distant relatives I barely spoke to try to reach me. I knew exactly why they were panicking. A few days ago, they thought they had won. Now they realized how badly they had miscalculated. The lawyer worked quickly. He sent them a legal notice demanding my money back, and if they didn't comply, we were ready to escalate. I had all the proof I needed. Bank statements showing where the money came from, texts between me and my mom mentioning keeping it in the safe, and even a security camera screenshot from their own house showing me bringing it in. There was no way they could spin this in their favor. On the second day, my mom left a long voicemail, her voice shaking as she asked why I was doing this to them. She talked about how they took me in when I had nowhere else to go, how I was being unfair, and how I should just let it go because family doesn't do this to each other. That part almost made me laugh. Family doesn't do that to each other? What exactly did she think they did to me? Then she dropped the bombshell. I wouldn't be getting my money back anytime soon because they had already spent most of it. I wasn't surprised. I had already seen Margaret's Instagram post showing off her new car, a used sedan that looked like it cost about 15 grand. She even captioned it, "Finally got my dream car," like she had worked for it or something. They hadn't just stolen from me. They had gone out and spent my money right away, completely convinced that there would be no repercussions. I gave them a deadline, the end of the week. If the money wasn't back by then, we would go to court. That's when things got ugly. The next day, my father tried to call. When I didn't answer, he sent a long text message about how I was tearing the family apart over money. Margaret sent several messages, each more desperate than the last, claiming that I was ruining her life and that she was barely getting anything out of it, as if that would make a difference. Then, out of nowhere, I got a text from an unknown number. "You don't know who you're dealing with. Drop the lawsuit before it's too late." I had to laugh. They were actually trying to threaten me. I showed the message to my brother, who sighed and said it was probably Uncle Mike. Mike was my father's older brother, a guy who liked to act like he was some kind of underground enforcer when, in fact, he was just an aging man who had watched too many mafia movies. He was always getting involved in things that had nothing to do with him and making bad situations worse. I didn't even bother to reply. Instead, I forwarded the message to my lawyer, who assured me that it would only make my case stronger. If they wanted to play dirty, I was more than ready. The real kicker came a day later. My lawyer called me, sounding almost amused. He'd been going through the financial records and found something interesting. My parents hadn't just spent my money on Margaret's car. They had also used some of it to pay off an overdue loan. A loan that, according to the paperwork, had been in default for months. They hadn't just stolen from me for Margaret's car. They had been in financial trouble long before that, and I had unwittingly become their way out. Now it all made sense. The sudden change in their attitude, the pressure to help out. They never took me in because they wanted to support me. They saw me as a walking ATM. But now they had a much bigger problem because if they thought this lawsuit was going to go away, they were in for a nasty surprise. When Friday rolled around, I expected one of two things to happen. Either my parents would return my money or we would officially move forward with the lawsuit. Instead, something even better happened. The lawyer had been digging through their financial records, and what he found wasn't just interesting. It was proof that my parents had been in trouble long before they decided to steal from me. Their debts weren't just delinquent. They were massive. Loans, unpaid bills, even a credit card that had been maxed out over a year ago and barely touched since. The 30 grand they took from me wasn't just for Margaret's car. They had used a good chunk of it to pay off an overdue loan that was hanging over their heads. They weren't just greedy. They were drowning, and they had decided that I would be their lifeline. It all made sense now, the way my mother kept reminding me how family helps family, the pressure to pitch in for Margaret's car, the way they turned on me the second I said no. They hadn't taken me in out of kindness. They saw my money, realized I was financially stable, and decided I was their way out. The funniest part? Even after all that, they still didn't think I would go through with the lawsuit. On the last day before my lawyer was supposed to file, my dad finally called me. I picked up the phone just to hear what kind of excuse he was going to make. He didn't start with an apology. He didn't admit anything. Instead, he went on a long rant about how I was putting unnecessary stress on the family and dragging their name through the mud. He talked about respect, loyalty, and how I needed to do the right thing by letting this go. Then he slipped. He let slip that they had already talked to their own lawyer, and their lawyer had told them they didn't have a good defense. I knew it. They knew they were screwed. I kept my voice calm and told him he had one last chance to return my money before things got worse. He tried to argue, tried to make me feel guilty, but I didn't let him. I just said, "Fix this now or we will go to court." Then I hung up. Less than an hour later, Margaret began texting me. At first, it was just insults, calling me selfish, saying I was a terrible brother, and that I was ruining her life over a stupid car. But then her tone changed. She sounded nervous. "Are you really going to take this to court? It's just money, Jacob. Do you really need it that bad? You already make so much. Why are you doing this to Mom and Dad?" I ignored them, let them sweat. That night, my brother and I went out for a drink. We talked about how crazy the whole situation had become, how Margaret and my parents had managed to turn something as simple as giving back the money they had stolen into a full-blown disaster. We laughed at how quickly they had cracked under the pressure. Then, just as I was taking a sip of my beer, my brother's phone buzzed. It was our dad. He had sent him a message that simply said, "Tell Jacob to check his bank account." I pulled up my banking app, half expecting another trick. But there it was, $30,000 wired directly to my account. No note, no apology, no nothing. I should have been relieved. It was over, right? But something felt wrong. Sure enough, my lawyer called me the next morning with an update. He had received a report on where the money had come from. My parents hadn't used their own money to pay me back. They had emptied a joint savings account that had Margaret's name on it. They didn't take responsibility. They didn't even try to fix what they had done. Instead, they had thrown Margaret under the bus. Now she was the one who panicked. The messages started pouring in. But this time she wasn't mad at me. She was mad at them. "Are you kidding me? They took my savings to pay you. I didn't even get all the money and now I'm broke. You did this on purpose, didn't you? You knew this would happen." I didn't answer. I just sat back and watched the chaos unfold. My mom started texting me, trying to play peacemaker, saying we all needed to come together as a family now that things were resolved. My father sent me a single message saying it was time to let the family heal. Meanwhile, Margaret was losing her mind. I had been angry with her for days, but now I was just entertained. They had turned on me because they thought I was expendable. They thought they could throw me away and move on as if nothing had happened. And now they had done the exact same thing to Margaret. Karma had worked faster than I had expected. But I wasn't done yet. Getting my money back should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. I thought that once they paid me, I could finally wash my hands of them, cut them off completely, and move on. But what I didn't realize was that by forcing them to pay me back so quickly, I had inadvertently triggered something much bigger. Something that was about to make their lives a living nightmare. 3 days after the money hit my account, my cousin Olivia called me out of the blue. We weren't that close, so I knew something was up. She didn't waste any time. "Did Mom and Dad finally pay you back?" I was surprised. "How do you know that?" She laughed. But it wasn't a normal laugh. It was the kind of laugh people make when they know something is about to get really messy. Because they borrowed from literally everyone in the family to do it. I sat up straight. What? Yeah, they didn't have the money, so they went around begging for help from anyone stupid enough to listen. Apparently, my parents had gone into full panic mode when they realized I was serious about the lawsuit. Instead of trying to work something out, they ran to every relative they could, spinning some sob story about being in temporary financial trouble and needing help. They had hit up aunts, uncles, cousins, anyone who would listen. And the best part? They had borrowed from the wrong people. My dad, in his infinite wisdom, had borrowed a huge chunk from Uncle Mike. The same Uncle Mike who had sent me that pathetic, "You don't know who you're messing with" text just days before. And now they were the ones in big trouble. I checked my phone and, sure enough, the family group chat had exploded. My mom was being called out left and right. One of my aunts had just demanded her money back by the end of the week. My dad tried to defend himself by saying it was a family thing and they just needed some time. No one bought it. And Uncle Mike? He wasn't just angry, he was furious. I found out later that he had given my dad money for business expenses months earlier. Money that had mysteriously never been paid back. So when my parents came crawling back to him, he assumed they were desperate. He gave them a loan, but only because they swore they'd pay it back quickly. Only now they had no way of doing that. So Uncle Mike started making threats, not just regular, "I want my money back" threats. He told them that if they didn't pay him back right away, he would go straight to the rest of the family and expose everything. Their debts, their lies, their spending habits. And worse, he knew people. Not in the mobster way he liked to pretend, but in the "I'm going to make your life hell" way. He had connections to people in my dad's business, and he made it very clear that if he didn't see his money soon, my dad's reputation would go down with him. My dad lost it. He called my brother and tried to get him on his side. My brother didn't just ignore him. He went over to their house just to rub it in. And that's when he told me the truth. "You know, they tried to set me up too, right?" I had no idea what he meant. He had never mentioned anything like that before. "Yeah," he said. "Back when I was in college, I saved up a few grand working part-time. I was going to use it for a car. One day, Dad offered to help me invest it so I could double it. I already knew where this was going. He took my money," my brother continued, "lost it in some sketchy investment and then pretended it never happened. When I asked him about it, he told me I shouldn't have trusted him with it and that it was a lesson in financial responsibility." I was speechless. I had always known that our parents played favorites, but I never realized how bad it was for him. And suddenly it all made sense why my brother had never relied on them for anything, and why he had never seemed as close to them as Margaret. They had burned him years ago, just as they were trying to burn me now. But here's the kicker. My brother had never forgotten. He had just been waiting for the perfect time to get back at them. And now he saw his chance. The next day, my brother made some phone calls to our extended family, people my parents hadn't borrowed from yet. And he made sure they knew everything. How our parents had stolen from me, how they had cheated him in the past, and how they had manipulated relatives into giving them money with fake sob stories. And just like that, they became completely untouchable. Nobody in the family wanted to have anything to do with them. One of my uncles even called them cheats to their face. Meanwhile, Margaret was still freaking out. After realizing that our parents had used up her savings to pay me back, she tried to get them to give her money back. But now that they were busy dealing with everyone else they owed, she got the same treatment they had given me. Ignored, brushed off, treated like an inconvenience. The best part? She actually tried to call me and ask for the money back. I let it go to voicemail. Then, just for fun, I texted her back, "Family helps family, right?" She didn't reply. At that point, my parents had officially hit rock bottom. They had borrowed money they couldn't pay back. They had ruined their reputation in the family. No one trusted them, and now they were completely alone. I was done with them. My brother was done with them. The family was done with them. They had spent years treating people like they were disposable. Now they were the ones being thrown away. It's been a while since everything went down, so I thought I'd come back with an update. A lot has changed, and to be honest, I'm still trying to process how quickly everything fell apart for them. Not for me. Let's start with the good news. I moved into my new apartment a few weeks ago, and it's easily the best place I've ever lived. I took my time picking the right city, the right building, and I finally have a place that actually feels like home. No more walking on eggshells, no more constant drama, no more dealing with people who only saw me as a paycheck. Life has been peaceful, almost too peaceful. I didn't realize how much stress I was carrying until I finally cut it all out. But as much as things have improved, there's still this weird feeling I can't shake. Like my own family died and I'm the only one left. I never thought I'd say this, but my parents and Margaret feel like complete strangers to me now. And I guess in a way they always were. I just didn't see it before. Now for the unexpected part. A few days ago, I received a call from an unknown number. Normally I ignore them, but for some reason I answered it. It was Margaret. I almost hung up right away, but before I could, she blurted out, "I moved out." I froze. Of all the things I thought she was going to say, that wasn't one of them. Apparently, after everything that had happened, my parents started treating her like the problem. They blamed her for taking my side, even though she never really did. They fought all the time, mostly about money. And when she finally confronted them about using up her savings, my dad told her she should be grateful they were helping her out as much as they were. Sound familiar? She finally realized they didn't care about her either. Not really. She was only valuable to them as long as she was useful. The moment she became a burden, they turned on her, too. So, she left. No money, no plan, just packed her bags and moved in with a friend. Then she asked me the question I knew was coming. "Do you think we could talk?" I sat there for a long moment, staring out the window of my new apartment, thinking about everything she had done, everything she had said, and then I told her the truth. "I don't think so, Margaret." She was silent for a while. Then she just said, "Yeah, I thought so," and she hung up. I don't know how she feels now, and I don't think I care. Maybe one day I'll be able to let it go. Maybe someday I won't feel so bitter. But for now, I'm just focusing on myself. Update. I thought I was done with this story. I thought I had closed the chapter, moved on, and left everything behind. But life has a funny way of throwing surprises at you when you least expect it. A few days ago, I got an email. Not a call, not a text. An email from my dad. At first, I thought it was some spam or maybe some attempt to guilt-trip me again. But when I opened it, I realized it was something completely different. It was a job inquiry. I had to read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't imagining things. My own father, who threw me out, stole from me, and turned the whole family against me, was asking me for a job. For context, my online business has been doing really well. Better than ever, actually. I don't just work for myself anymore. I've expanded, hired a small team, and started working on bigger projects. I guess word got around, and somehow my dad found out that I was doing even better after cutting them off. His email was written like we were distant acquaintances, not father and son. No apologies, no mention of what had happened, just some nonsense about how he had been looking for new opportunities and how he thought we could put the past behind us and work together. He even attached his resume. I sat there staring at the screen, feeling every possible emotion at once. Anger, disbelief, amusement. And then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was just so pathetic. The same man who once told me I was tearing the family apart over money was now coming to me like I was some random hiring manager who could save him. I didn't even reply. I just forwarded the email to my brother with the subject line, "You're going to love this." He called me 5 minutes later, dying laughing. He told me that after I cut them off, things had only gotten worse for our parents. The family stopped trusting them, the money dried up, and the debts kept piling on. Uncle Mike was still chasing them for his loan, and they had zero way to pay him back. They were scrambling. So now my dad, who always acted like he was the smartest guy in the room, was desperate enough to come crawling to me for help. I don't know what kind of response he expected, but I do know exactly what I did. I marked the email as spam and went on with my day. And that's when it really hit me. I didn't care anymore. Not about revenge, not about proving a point, not about getting the last word. They weren't my problem anymore. And that, more than anything, felt like the real victory. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.